So therefore, if it does sound, please follow the fire and emergency procedures that are applicable to the council house. Please can I also ask that your microphone is switched on when you are speaking and it is turned off when you are not, and your mobile device is turned to silence. This meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of subsequent repeated viewing by entering the Warspite room, and during the meeting, councillors are consenting to being filmed and to the use of those recordings for website purposes. Also today, we have at 4:15 some young people coming in to talk to us, which you should have had an email about. I would like them to have as much time as possible to be clear in their questions and to get the answers that they're asking for. So I'm asking for patience, and it might just be that, you know, we're pushed for time at the end for our questions, but I would really like them to have time. Thank you. So moving on to apologies, I have any apologies from Councillor Holloway.
Thank you, Chair. I'd want to draw your attention to an absence, but not one that's listed in today's members list. So there are 13 seats on this panel, including yourself and the Vice Chair. But there's 2 vacancies, one of which has sadly been left unfilled since May 2023. So I absolutely appreciate the contributions and experience of Councillors Carlisle and Harrison and what they bring to this panel. It's just a shame that that isn't shared by their party at large. They're only filling 2 of their 4 seats on this scrutiny. So I do find it incredibly disappointing that the Conservatives continue to neglect their obligations to this scrutiny. So I think it's important that these vacancies are listed in the minutes, the committee details on the website and in future documents. Would that be possible?
I'll make sure that's documented. Thank you, Councillor McLeay. Are there any other apologies, Jake? Declarations of interest. Do members have any declarations of interest in respect to any items on the agenda? Thank you very much. And now moving on to the minutes, to confirm the minutes of the last meeting held. I am aware of some admin errors to be amended. Is that okay, Jake? Is everyone happy to approve the minutes? Thank you. I have no urgent business, so we'll move on to tracking decisions. There are two actions, right? I don't know where David is. He's got the response to one of them. I have seen a response to tracking decision 1, which I brought to this scrutiny back in September. I'm not entirely satisfied with that response, and I would like the letter to go out to Matt from this scrutiny committee and to receive a response, if that could be noted as well, Jake, please. What about tracking decision 3? Nigel, tracking decision 3?
Apologies, Chair. I didn't have the data in time to submit it for when the papers went out. I've now got 4 years worth of data. I'm just waiting on the update for this candidate here, and then I'll send it out to members.
Thank you very much, Nigel. Finance report monitoring. Moving to item 6, the finance report monitoring report. Can I hand over to Matthew Fulton, lead accountancy manager, to present this item to the committee? And the recommendation is that the overview scrutiny committee notes to forecast revenue monitoring position at period 9 as set out in this report in the sum of 2.812 million.
Good afternoon, members and colleagues. The report breaks down the budgetary changes between previous financial years and this one. CYPF saw a reduction of 464,000 from 22-23 to 23-24. This is made up of a number of changes. Additional cost and volume for placements was received at 3.053 million. Pay award adjustment, pension increase adjustment, and additional MTFP targets. These MTFP targets saw the budget reduction go down by between financial years of 464,000. The education participation and skills budget saw an increase between financial years of 1.827 million. This was largely down to home to school transport. Looking at our position for Q3, there is an overspend. We all know that there's difficulties facing the authority at the minute, and this is largely down to the increased costs that we are facing due to sufficiency issues and the volume of children in the city. Work is being done to address this, but there have been issues, and the increased NTFP target set at the start of the year perhaps should have been shared earlier as unachievable. We just cannot address that at the minute, and it's something we're looking to do in future financial years, but for this financial year it is down as a pressure. The investment into homeschool transport into EPNS of just over £1 million was hoped to right-size the budget, but again, that hasn't been achievable in this financial year, and we've had to increase that pressure further. So the bottom line for children at Q3 is 1.859 in EPNS and CYPF 8.929 million, close to £11 million over budget. Thank you.
Are we okay to take questions? I do have a couple, but I'll open it up to the rest of you. So I have John and Councillor Stevens, and then I have Councillor B, I think.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know who to address this to, perhaps David. I'll give you a. Shall I ask the question and then slowly? And then, okay. Thanks very much for the information, Matt. But I guess my question would be towards one of the director staff in terms of education provision. Just as unexpected overspends have arisen because there's a need to be met, what's the impact of the budget lines that have been enforced to be cut? What's the impact on any planned work that money was due to cover? Because presumably at the start of the year, that was also a need that needed to be met.
Are you okay?
Don't worry.
I actually think I was going to say something to kind of introduce the report. So while David gets his coat off, Matt obviously talks very apologetically about overspending, but we have to remember that money is going to. This isn't some frivolous exercise. This is because these children need looking after, and we've talked at length, ad nauseum, till cows come home, about sufficiency, about placement costs. We brought a motion, last month in between these meetings, talking about profiteering and the obscene profits that providers make. That's not to make excuses, and I don't want anybody to have the impression that every placement cost is not scrutinised and scrutinised and scrutinised by Matt, by the teams whose job it is to do that. But I listened to the Education Select Committee yesterday, and that was dominated by placement sufficiency, placement costs. And I know I have said it here and in other places many times, this is not a Plymouth problem. It's a Plymouth problem because we're in Plymouth. But I'm beginning to see and feel and hope that actually there's going to be some kind of national intervention in this, because otherwise I don't see how not just Plymouth, any other council can continue, because we are at the mercy of people who provide placements. I feel a great deal of confidence in the budget we have for the coming year, because we've right-sized that. I'm confident in the predictions and the forecasts that come with that. There's a significant investment in that budget for next year, so that I very much hope we will not be having this conversation in February 2025. But I just, obviously David can answer specifics around placements and why this is, it's alarming. If I'm sitting where you are, I'd be asking what you're asking. But I feel that we can't have the conversation without setting the context and the landscape first. Thank you.
Councillor, would you like me?
I think Councillor Creswell just had something to add, if that's okay.
I was just going to add to what Councillor Jemima Lang has so eloquently put forward, is that you can also see that one of the other big pressures on the budget is homeschool transport. And again, that is reflected, that is not just a Plymouth problem, this is actually a problem local authorities are facing up and down the country. And I think last November, I actually went to a conference with some of our members here, and also with David. And one of the big issues that came across, that all authorities, regardless of what political persuasion authorities were facing this major pressure in terms of homeschool transport and pressures on their special educational needs budgets. And it is it's not because of any failure that we have in Plymouth or things that we haven't done. And obviously early intervention will in fact help for our planning. But the fact is that all local authorities are being subjected to the same pressures. And it's very important that the message, I think, comes out from all local authorities and people like ourselves to make it clear to national government of the sort of pressures that we are actually under.
Thank you, Councillor Creswell. David?
I mean, just to comment, by the very virtue of the fact that we do have a significant overspend, we have maintained then the provision across the service. So we are, of course, reviewing our budgets and looking at where we are spending our money and making sure we are as efficient, as effective as we can, and all of the things you would expect to be done in strongly managing a budget. We have brought forward some of our actions, and we currently have some very focused plans in place in some parts of the service to ensure that we are managing as tightly as we can in the next, what have we got now, 4.5 weeks in relation to the 23-24 budget. So I think we are striking well the balance between we have a service to run and we have children to safeguard and care for, alongside we have significant budget pressures, and how are we managing that going forward without, for example, putting in things like recruitment freezes, for example. We're not at that point where we're holding the reins really tight and we're having to stop some things, but we are doing it in I believe, a well-controlled and managed way in relation to 23-24. As we move into 24-25, we will have to maintain that, because clearly, as Councillor Lang has said, and it is likely to be some additional investment into children's services, and we've got to use that wisely, and we've got to use it well in terms of the immediate impact as well as the longer term impact for children and young people. And we are probably moving into a position where we are going to have to make more and more difficult decisions in relation to the budget. But the principal things in relation to controlling the budget are, as has been stated, the management of children's placements in order to meet the need of children in the right placement and reduce the numbers of children that are in high-cost residential placements or unregulated. That is generally in the best interests of the children and young people, and there is a very focused work programme around that. The outcomes of the Fostering Summit, which I'm sure we'll alight on a bit later in the meeting, and how we're driving the work around increasing foster carers, is one strand of it. The second key strand is around our recruitment campaign. So we have launched a new branded recruitment campaign in order to, as quickly as possible, convert agency and interim workers into permanent roles. So we're reducing cost of our workforce. And the third area, as Councillor Creswell has said, is in relation to home to school transport. So they're the three key strategic priorities in relation to budget management.
Okay.
Thank you, Dave.
Can I ask a supplementary? Is that okay?
Okay.
Is it on now? Okay. Thanks very much. And I appreciate the work that the strategic thinking, working with elected members, working with your officers and finance to get to this stage. Well, And as you said, there's a proposal for an additional £12 million to be put into children's services next year, which I think is great. Because one, as elected members responsible for this area of work, and yourselves, you've obviously made yourself heard, but you've made it heard not or just to meet the statutory requirements to meet Plymouth children in the context of a national finance crisis, basically, for their needs. And do you feel satisfied, therefore, that the additional money next year will, whilst it's not kind of new money and lots of money to spend, will actually cover your bases for the identified work at this stage?
Shall I invite Nigel just Nigel has led on the work, the modelling work and the volume work, very detailed work that's taken place to arrive at the projections. So I don't...
Jemima.
I was going to let Nigel go first. I'll go after.
So the projections we did were based on the numbers of children we had in care back in October. Those numbers in children in care have continued to increase, albeit we did project a slight increase because we were looking at ourselves compared to statistical neighbours and what we thought authority of a similar sort of demographic would achieve. However, demand continues to cause us significant issues, and supply of placements for children continue to cause us significant issues. That additional investment next year is a significant move forward in terms of right-sizing the budget. However, to remain within that is not without its challenges, and we will still have to hold very tight purse strings and continue with our improvement work. We know we've got more children in our care today, and if they remain in our care at that cost, then we will still have significant challenges next year.
Thank you, Nigel. Jemima.
Yeah, so to your point about, well done for kind of fighting the corner, I think it's really important to say that actually there's been a significant move to make this a whole council priority around children's services. So as other people will know, sometimes you do have these awkward conversations with your cabinet colleagues because you're saying, well, you can't do this because we need to do that kind of thing. And it's a bit of to and fro. It's not like that. It's been accepted by the cabinet and the council as a whole, across directorates, that this has got to be a priority. And so I think, obviously taken with Nigel's caveats, but I feel like instead of always, we'll all be familiar with it, people who've been councillors for a while, the kind of playing catch up all the time and having this conversation at this time of year. Nigel's work and the extra money that's going to that budget is about having had a realistic conversation, and hopefully is going to give us a fighting chance of having a budget that is realistic for the needs, but it is a demand-led service. But I think the forecasting is very sophisticated, and so that is I feel assured, as far as I can be, that it's a realistic budget, not a budget where you just have to come back and say, oh, there wasn't enough money last time round, which is how I prefer to frame it, as opposed to saying that we're overspending.
Thank you, Jemima. Matt, would you like to come in?
Yeah, I'd just like to highlight the volatility of the market with a couple of examples. One day last month, a young lady returned home from supported living placement at £3,300 per week. The next day, the exact same bed and the exact same accommodation was costing us £4,100. The provider increased their rates overnight. Alternatively, we've been paying over £17,000 for one child, and we're now paying £7,000 per week. The providers have the authority where they want us. They can charge what they want, and because there's sufficiency issues, we often have to pay it. So it just highlights it changes from hour to hour, day to day, and we can forecast as accurately as we can at that moment, but it does change, and we are working with other authorities, providers, to come to a common ground.
Thank you. With regards to the cost of care, there's some work going on around that, isn't there, Nigel? Would you like to explain a bit more about that?
Yeah, it's multifaceted. So one example of the Homes for Children project plan includes using a different assessment tool, which is used by a number of authorities, where it has a different conversation about the needs of a young person and a child, and it helps us then challenge the market in terms of finding the right placement. And also we can plot those children with their scores with this assessment tool against spend to see whether that looks right and proportionate. So we're now implementing that tool. Other authorities have used it, have seen some reduction in cost. However, it's also fair to say some authorities have said that that helps them manage the increased demand rather than savings. So we've got to be realistic about what that will achieve for us, but we're optimistic that will be a significant help for us. The other part of the work around homes for children obviously is about growing our own foster carers, and that work's a particularly important strand of work there.
Thank you. I was going to bring this up a little bit later, but if it was okay, would it be okay to have a councillor kind of briefing on the tool that you were talking about? It's Berry tool, isn't it?
It is. It's the Berry tool. Yeah, absolutely. We can do that.
Wonderful. Thank you. Councillor Beer.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's worth pointing out to everybody here that actually we're working on a Conservative budget that was set last year, and the difficulties are that that was cut last year. So just making a statement there. I'm very aware of the pressures under the children's budget, but on page 19 there's some red bits there which flagged up for me. And I wonder how confident you are of actually producing a balanced budget this year, given that we've got some reds in there under some aspects of the budget.
Who would like to?
I think as we've already said, that we've got plans in place to contain the budget this year as much as we possibly can. So we've got a 6-week plan around that in terms of everything we can absolutely do to reduce that budget. But we are still at the moment dealing with unknown demand. Young people we don't always know about them when they arrive, and we need to do something to keep them safe. So we're doing everything we possibly can to stay within what we've already forecast for this year.
Okay.
What if we don't make it?
Nigel.
What if we don't make it? Then we'll be in a very difficult scenario, and we're carrying that. So the work we're doing today will carry on into the next financial year. If we don't make the saving in the next 6 weeks, then we'll keep on trying to make that saving into the next financial year. Some of the work that we're doing is about laying the foundations for the future. It will not deliver the savings in the next 6 weeks, but some of the work may well be cashable. It's just the stuff that Matt and I do on a weekly basis, tracking ins and outs, scrutinising every spend, every member of staff, every contract, and doing what we can to make those decisions now.
Thank you, Nigel.
Councillor Lang.
And again, at the risk of repeating myself, I think this is why it can't be left to local authorities to keep dealing with this like this. The amount of time it takes to keep across all of this, the resource that goes into doing that. There was a report out from the LGIU this morning, and on the Today programme, every local authority person they spoke to talked about their budget being pressured by adult social care, but also all of them said about children's social care. So again, I think, it's a plea to whoever can listen to our plea. We haven't had a reply to our letter that the leader of the council wrote to the children's minister. We've had an acknowledgement, but we haven't had a reply addressing the specific issue around profits and profiteering. And I think I'd be really interested to see what that reply says, because I feel like this conversation will be happening in committee rooms across the country where people are saying we can't do this unless the government intervenes in some way in this market. What is it? 90% of it is private providers. And as Matt says, you can move out of a placement and then a child from Coventry might need that bed and they can charge what they like, or, and we are really at their mercy. And if you challenge the cost too far, they can just say, look, they know they've got a whole queue of other people who will come and take that placement. So, as I say, I know I sound like I'm repeating myself, and I'm not excusing you know, problematic figures. I'm really not, but it's just, I do feel confidence in the budget going forward, you know, a significant amount of money uplift in that budget for next year, you know, not to be sniffed at. It's serious money, but it gives me confidence that it will be less likely that we will be having this conversation and these kind of questions in 12 months' time.
Thank you very much. Any further questions? Sorry, Councillor Harrison.
Thank you, Chair. My question was just, you know, obviously we're saying about placements where we're having to pay for out of area placement and a significant amount. Are we, where we have the ability to recoup money, you know, looking at what we're charging for out of areas coming into Plymouth, so that actually we're making the most of what we can do? Or is that beyond? Obviously, I know Councillor Lang said a lot of it is private, but where it isn't, you know, or we go, no, well, different councils have also got problems, so we won't make them pay more than, you know, we think they could afford.
Councillor Lang?
I'm not sure if I understand the question. We don't have any provision.
Okay, so you said just now sort of 80 or 90% of private providers.
I'm talking about in the whole country. Oh, right. Yeah, sorry, I'm talking about the system as a whole. Apologies. Yeah, no, we don't. It's something we're exploring, and lots of other councils are all doing that. You know, all going, actually, maybe we need to bring some of this in-house, so we've got a bit more control, not necessarily of the money, but of who goes there and how long they can stay there and the reasons that they can stay there or the reasons that they have to leave, all those kind of things. So, yeah, sorry if I misled you. What I mean is the market as a whole is, I think I'm right, somewhere around 90% of it is private provision.
Would you like to come in on that?
It's just to add really, because there's a really good point about, you know, children being placed away from Plymouth. A key part of our strategy is to try and bring as many of our children where it's safe and right to do so as close to Plymouth as possible, because not only does that help us in terms of placement costs, it helps us with cost of social worker time. Those children are more likely to be able to remain in the same school and remain close to the families, which helps us reunification. So there are lots of added benefits from trying to get our children closer. And at the moment, you know, we may talk later on about some of the children I've got placed in unlawful, unregistered settings. They are placed around the country in the Lake District, doing some reunification work when they're having to be placed that far away from home is particularly challenging and expensive.
Okay. I do have one just quick question, please. Can I ask what the what the progress is on implementing the council tax that we brought to council for the foster care?
Well, I was going to talk about the fostering summit, but if you want to.
Calculations were updated this morning. We've got live figures that can be shared with David, so I'm sure he'll share with Councillor Lang shortly. We've got proposed increases, not only to council, you know, the council tax, but what foster care is being paid. I'm sure that'll be shared at a convenient time.
Thank you very much. Councillor Lang, would you like to come in?
I don't know if this is the right time to talk about the fostering summit.
Shall we move on and talk about it in a moment? Is
Yeah,
that
sure.
Yeah. Moving on to item 7, the performance scorecard. Is it okay if we take this report and move straight to questions? Thank you. Questions? Councillor Penrose.
Yes, thank you very much for this. On page 29, looked after children, it was just the final paragraph where we seem to be talking about increases each time. I just wonder if this is a trend, and if so, what do we know about what is behind it? The final paragraph on page 29.
Every time. So a lot of this is referring to what councillors and Nigel was just talking about then, is that across the country there's a significant increase in demand and not those placements to put children into. So that's what that's talking about. And again, where it's talking about tasking and finished groups, it's where we're doing these pieces of work to try and understand what we can do to reduce those or address them when they're happening.
Thank you. Councillor Dingle.
Thank you. Okay, so my question is regarding to thresholds. So concerns were raised with me recently in my role as a secondary school governor regarding thresholds. The concerns are that the school are referring students who they feel are clearly meeting thresholds, but then the students are being classified as lower than the threshold the school feel the student is clearly meeting. I also know that colleagues around the table feel that thresholds aren't consistent. I was wondering if there could be any clarification on why this is happening.
Would that be Nigel? Thank you.
There's been an enormous amount of work done on thresholds in the time that I've been in Plymouth. Nearly 400 practitioners were trained across the partnership. A significant number of those were schools in terms of the thresholds. It's fair to say that when people attended that training, for some of them it was a challenge to understand what the thresholds actually are and how that may differ from some of their perception in terms of what actually does meet the need for child protection. What we can say, and although our report has not been published yet from Ofsted, we can say we've done various things now to verify the progress that's been made, including our own quality assurance work, feedback from partners, including schools, and through our sector-led improvement partner, Dorset. And finally, you'll see, hopefully in the next few weeks when the Ofsted report comes out, there is confidence now in the decisions we're making in the front door in the MASH. They are right for children and they are timely. But happily to speak to any school if they're not sure and they've still got concerns. I'll happily speak to those schools and work through it with them. So please feel free to pass on my details and happy to have that conversation.
Thank you very much, Nigel. Councillor Lang.
Yeah, I want to echo just about the work that has gone into the work around thresholds, and I think you're always going to find examples of where people are at odds over whether thresholds have been met or not. But just to say that the intensive work that started in the MASH back in the summer, one of the key focuses of that was around thresholds and then training partners, and a lot of the feedback, and I know it was raised with you as well, wasn't it, Councillor Creswell, from schools, was that the training was really good and had actually provided clarity. So for reassurance, you know, it's a big piece of work that's still ongoing that has had positive results. And I think, as Nigel says, there's always going to be occasions where there's a difference of opinion around threshold and whether it's been met or not. And yeah, if there's individual schools that are raising it, then that can be looked at individually. But it's a reassurance around the amount of work that has gone in to provide consistency. And I spent time in the MASH, and the team in there told me that actually one of the things had been around getting different views from managers and things like that, and that had stopped. Everybody was consistent and getting a consistent message. So I wanted to say that, given that thresholds have been brought up, but obviously when there's individual instances of people feeling it's wrong, then that can be dealt with individually.
Thank you, Councillor Lang. Sorry, carry on.
Thank you, Chair. I was very interested to read about this recruitment of new social workers to fill a gap. And on page 27 talks about how you're preparing them, and you've got an additional team who are working with them to bring them up to speed. I was just a bit worried because then when we go into the next section about the improvement update, there seems to be a confident suggestion that caseloads are being met and being dealt with. But this little paragraph about the new social workers seems to be saying that you've got people sort of leaving their caseload in order to give an induction to the new social workers. Can you reassure us that our social workers are not being too stretched and are in fact coping with their own caseloads?
Nigel?
So manageable workloads for our social workers is one of our key priorities. that enables two things to happen. One's a better quality of service, but also helps us with our workforce retention. The additional team that we're referring to here, we brought that in because of the increased demand that came through our front door at the back end of the summer last year in terms of the remedial work we did in the front door. But equally, it's also recognition that part of our recruitment strategy was to recruit newly qualified social workers and international social workers. And because of their development that's required, they have a capped caseload. Therefore, we need to have additional social workers to compensate for that. So it's not like somebody's having to leave their work to do other work for other people. We're actually very protective of those people who need to be developed, because if we get that right, they'll stay. So those newly qualified social workers, if they're well supported in that first year post-qualifying, they then will stay with us in years 2, 3 and beyond. And that's our key part of our strategy. But it does mean for a period of time, we've had to have extra staff to making sure we're not increasing workloads disproportionately for other staff.
Thank you.
Councillor Cresswell.
Just a little bit of anecdotal evidence, and in fact on that, is having been taken part in Practice Week, which would have been a few months ago now, and asking those, having those informal conversations with a social worker who actually said how there had definitely been an improvement as far as caseloads and such. And one of the things she referred to as well is easing the caseloads as far as newly qualified social workers were as well. And as I say, that's an anecdotal thing of having that conversation, but it's one of the advantages, and I would urge everyone when there's next a practice week to actually take part in that, because it gives you a really useful insight and a good opportunity to actually talk to those people who are on the ground. And I'm sure that would be very much reiterated by Councillor Lang as well.
Councillor Lang?
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. And also to say, we've talked about how competitive it is around placements. It's very competitive in the recruitment world, and obviously money, salary, those are important things. But speaking to social workers in this authority and in other authorities, caseload is really key to whether people want to work in your authority or not. And it's been a clear focus of the improvement work to get caseloads down. For all the reasons that everybody stated. It's best for children, it's best for staff, and it makes our recruitment drive, which we've launched, makes a more attractive proposition. And we know social workers talk to each other, and if you were thinking of coming to Plymouth, you'll ring one of your pals who's a social worker here, and probably the first question you'll ask is around caseload. So it's been really important to get those numbers down.
I have Councillor Harrison next, thank you.
Thank you. And I think it follows on from Councillor Penrose's question on page 27. Obviously, we know that we've got social workers that are newly qualified and do need that extra time, and obviously particularly when we've got international social workers. Totally appreciate their caseload needs to be less so that they actually get a grip of what they're doing. But on the basis of obviously the numbers that we've got, and especially obviously the numbers of child in need plans that have increased, is the trajectory planned that actually it will reduce? Because there was a heavy advertising for social workers. Those social workers are now in. They've had their potentially, if they've had their 6 months in, additional induction, or sort of much better induction, supported induction, are we now at a basis of thinking actually now we can increase their caseloads, and on top of that, are they permanent, or are we talking about interims that potentially we could lose and we're spending more on, and then we're starting all over again and having to do more supported inductions, and therefore our costs are going to continue, and the young people that we should be supporting are not getting, there's not enough to go around. Thank you.
Nigel?
So lots in that one. So the newly qualified social workers have a protected caseload for the first year, and in fact they will have a high caseload, but again a protected workload into years 2 and future years. Similarly with our overseas workers, it will take longer than 6 months before they take on a full caseload. The additional team that we've talked about, we did bring that in. They are, it's often referred to as a managed team. They are provided by a private company. Our plans for next year and the additional investment next year is about building those into our workforce as a permanent workforce. So they will exit and we'll hopefully have new experienced social workers we'll be recruiting. We are currently out to recruiting. We have a new recruitment campaign now to recruit experienced social workers. At the moment, we've got more than enough newly qualified. They're fantastic, but we do need to get some to fill those posts. Yeah, so we are looking to replace that managed team with experienced social workers. Then that creates the scenario that we've built into our financial forecasting in terms of how we'll then achieve the savings and the improvements that we intend to make.
Councillor Lang?
I would add, I mean, I keep getting the ad, it's coming up on my Facebook. I guess maybe because, I don't know, the algorithm says I'm interested in children's social care or something. So if you see it, please share it. It's a really good campaign. It's a nice video from David on the website. It's really good. No, it is. It's really nice. You know, it talks about why Plymouth is a great place to come and be a social worker. So if you see it, share it, or maybe we can send the links around and share on your own social media. I think that'd be really helpful if you were happy to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. So I have a couple of people left on this, but I do want to bring these young people in at 4:15. So if you could please make your questions as clear and concise as possible. Thank you. I have Councillor Beer next.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I just want to have a little whinge, really, because I have this one every year. You keep putting down children and young people as percentages. It's nice to have the actual numbers of children that are affected by different issues. So that's my whinge over for the day. On page 28, the category of abuse and current child protection plans and sexual abuse is there. What is happening with those children suffering from abuse, and what interventions are being taken and the monitoring of that particular issue?
Nigel?
Yeah, so the interventions will be very much depending on those individual needs. So often that incurs additional cost. I chair a weekly panel with any requests for therapy or any questions around what sort of assessments we might need to do. So we've got strong oversight of those for those individual young people, and they can vary depending on the age of the child and what they've experienced.
Thank you, Councillor Beer. Councillor Stevens.
Thank you, Chair. On page 26, there's the anomaly of 22-23 for referrals, which is really low compared to the 2 years before, and much lower than the current year. Could you just briefly explain why that occurred? But also, was there an impact then on children and families for fewer referrals being made the following year? You know, because they might have been missed. And then the next part of the question is, on page 28, you anticipate an increase in the number of children subject to child protection plans. Could you please briefly explain why that's the case, why you've come to that conclusion? And also, does the capacity to support increased load of families with child protection plans, is that built into the system, or will the caseload rise because of the anticipated increase?
Nigel?
Okay. So let's deal with the referrals. I can confidently say the numbers of children that referred in 2023 were not right.
Yeah.
We were not dealing with our referrals correctly, and that's part of the remedial work that we've now taken place. If you look at now Q3 this year, we're up to 3,484. So we are now in line with where we think we should be in terms of statistical neighbours. So please be assured the number you're seeing now, I'm confident is the right number. Yeah. I couldn't say that for you in 22-23. Yes, we have predicted the numbers of child protection plans will increase. In fact, they have significantly. They've increased significantly from the number that you see in this report today, sharply. We predicted they would go up because we compared ourselves to statistical neighbours, and I spotted that we were significantly lower than we should be with a population like we have in Plymouth. That number has gone up. It hasn't dramatically increased caseloads because actually this is about getting the right plan for the right child. So some of those children we were working with, but we weren't necessarily identifying the risks and seeing the benefits of having a multi-agency child protection plan. as our practice has improved, we're now getting that more right for our children. So my prediction is the numbers will have spiked, and they will find its new level and be somewhere around the 250, 260 mark, I would have thought would be about right for Plymouth. We're now, as of today, 290. So that's, again, that's the work that we are currently doing to bring those numbers to be right for our children.
And a supplementary, is there?
Sorry, I'm not going to be able to. Sorry, John. Councillor McLeay.
Thank you, Chair. We've heard several times on this scrutiny about the importance to attract and retain new foster carers in our system. So I'm really pleased on page 30 a task and finish group, has been established to progress this. I'm just wondering if you can tell me a little bit about who's going to sit on this and how they'll report into this scrutiny.
Nigel?
Probably goes into some of the stuff later on, but the task and finish group has come out of the Fostering Summit. That will include foster carers. They're the key people to be engaging with here, and officers to look at what's the package that's going to attract foster carers to come and work from Plymouth. For those of us at the summit, it's really interesting to hear their feedback on that, and also quite a challenge to us. And some of those things weren't necessarily what we had in our minds, but clearly we need to listen to what they're saying. And largely that's about support, actually. Yes, they'd all welcome and uplift in terms of allowances, but actually it's more about how those allowances are applied rather than the actual overall sum, if that makes sense. So the difference between some age groups they've asked us to look at, and they're interested about what support they can have, access to training. So that's the focus of the task and finish group, is now to take that into the next steps. Some of that will be about looking at our finances and our allowances, but there's also a second piece of work which is about how we support our foster carers and align that with new initiatives such as Mockingbird that will be coming in next year as well. So the key part of this, we started this by engaging our foster carers, and we want to make sure we hold on to that and keep them involved.
Thank you very much, Nigel. Anybody else want to come in on that note? I have Councillor Tippett.
Thank you, Chair. My question's on page 32 about the Ofsted outcomes. I can see over the last couple of years now we've seen a significant improvement in our Ofsted outcomes, and I was just wondering if there was any particular good practice that you think has led to this fantastic achievement for the city.
Councillor Emma. Who would like to take Councillor Emma? Councillor Cresswell, sorry.
Yes, I think I would be more cautious. I think we are definitely, and we'll talk about that a bit later on, but we're definitely moving in the right direction, and that's really, really important. We're moving in the right direction. That's really important. We've got more of our schools are good or better, which is important. We can see that we're much more in line with our statistical neighbours and such, which is really important, and that's and very much want to see that that progress carrying on and moving. And yes, there's something to very much celebrate there, but I am someone who is also never complacent, and there is always room for further improvement. There is no reason why we shouldn't be doing even better than our statistical neighbours, and that's where you always want to be moving towards. This is my teacher coming out with me about being aspirational and such. So yes, very positive, and we're going to talk about that a bit later on, but there is still, and I think you would probably agree with me around this table, there is still always more to do. Thank you very much, but a good start.
Thank you, Councillor Cresswell. I do have a couple of questions myself, but I am happy for them to be noted and for you to answer me through email, if that's okay. And I would urge Councillor Stevens to do the same. Sorry, I was trying to be a good chair. So my first question is the Leaders for Excellence programme. I'd just like to understand a little bit more about that, if that was possible. What is the expected outcome of that programme? What do we want it to bring? What do we think it will bring? My other question, which kind of leads on from Councillor Stevens a little bit, is the NSPCC neglect assessment tool. I'd like to understand a little bit more about that as well, if it was possible. And I know that I'm always asking for a briefing because I love a briefing, but would it be possible for us all to have a little bit better understanding of that? Thank you. Everybody happy? Moving on to item 8. Children's Social Care Improvement Plan. Can I hand over to Councillor Jemima Lang, Deputy Leader of the Council and Cabinet Member for Children's Social Care, Culture, Events and Communications, to introduce the report?
Thank you very much. This report highlights the progress that's been made to improve practice and outcomes for children in Plymouth. We're now at the end of the stabilising and firm foundations phase of the plan and moving into develop, sustain and embed. The report provides a summary of the self-assessment that was shared with Ofsted in the recent inspection of the local authority's children's services. Obviously, we can't talk too much about that yet, but the highlights include providing the assurance that the improvements that have been made in the front door in response to the focus visit at the end of 2022 have been achieved and, most importantly for me, sustained. Stabilising the workforce, leadership and additional investment has improved recruitment and retention that has then created more manageable workloads, as we've talked about, for frontline practitioners and managers. We have a clear understanding of our strengths and further areas for improvement, and I don't think it's spoiling anything to say that Ofsted felt that we do know ourselves and we entered the process in a very open fashion. And I'd like to thank everybody in the children's services for the way, you know, they were here for 3 weeks. It's no mean feat to get through that, but actually everybody just really demonstrated their passion and their drive and absolutely lent into what needed to be done during that process. So I would like to publicly thank everybody for that. Actually, it says here in my notes, but throughout the inspection, our workforce was able to demonstrate their passion and their commitment to the children of Plymouth and show the difference that they're making to their lives. We're in the process of consulting with staff on the 11 key priorities of the next phase of improvement and the 3-year plan. And the inspection report from Ofsted will be published on the 15th of March.
Thank you, Jemima. Would anyone else like to add anything to this? No, so we go straight to questions. There is something I would just like to bring up. I should have brought it up in the last bit, but it does relate to this. The unregistered placements. I just think that it's not reported under 5, apparently, and I think if we're taking such a strong stance as I know you do, Nigel, it probably should be reported, like it says, we have 5 now. Is that correct?
We've currently got 7. The numbers change. I review them every week. So as of today, we do have 7 young people in those placements. I can give you a breakdown, a bit of a summary if you'd like, in terms of verbally.
So yeah, I mean 7 it's gone up quite a bit, hasn't it? And
the numbers fluctuated between, in my time, so when I arrived there were 11. That number we got down to 4 at one point, I think it was, and it's hovered between 4 and 7 for the last few months. The names of those children change. It's not always the same children. Just to give you some assurance that we do review them every week, and confident that we've got rigorous oversight of each of those children. Some of those children are not in Ofsted registered placements, so they're in Care Quality Commission CQC placements. So we're confident in the care they're receiving, and those children are actually doing very well. But we do have to class them as being unregistered and unlawful because they don't meet the Ofsted. They're not registered by Ofsted. 4 of those 7 children are currently in placements. We've got active conversations going on with potential placements, with potential moves on in the next few weeks. So it's a constant one for us.
okay, I appreciate that. Thank you. Paul, did you?
So I think the table you're looking at doesn't actually include the unregistered in there, so we could put an extra line in to separate that out. What Nigel was saying there is they can be in some of those unregistered will be in the other line, but some will be in a different place if they're in the process of registering. So it's not as clear as that table, so I can put another line in if that's useful.
That would be really helpful, thank you. I think it's quite an important bit of information that we need, so if we could do that, that would be fantastic. Councillor Macleay?
Thank you, Chair. So I was really moved by the 10 wishes for what children and young people want. I think it's a really strong document. I wanted to pick up on one of the 10 wishes, which is we want professionals to understand when we need to talk to them one-on-one. So looking at page 54, 81% are currently seen alone when they're in care. Can I check to see what we're doing to improve that number and whether we have a target in mind for that?
Nigel?
I'll tell you what we're doing to improve whilst I quickly remember what the target we set. So one thing I would say, caveat to that, that's including all children. Sometimes it's not appropriate to see the child alone, maybe a baby, for example. So that this is all children in care, no judgment at all whether age or not. So actually that performance is quite strong. I'm pretty sure I'm going to say my target is 90 or 95% now. All or not. Children in care, yeah. 95. So, but again, that's a recognition of ages within that as well. It's one we constantly look at. Sometimes it's a slip of the keyboard in terms of not ticking the right box, and that's part of our challenges in terms of constant data cleaning. And we do routinely, robustly look at all of these children. Yeah.
Thank you, Nigel. Councillor Stevens?
Thank you. It is a quick one. I really like this document, but when it says you're aiming to move from getting to good to being, which areas of the service, as it stands now, do you feel able to progress to being first? Or second, third? You know, which ones do you feel will be being sooner than others?
That's a difficult question to ask, and I'm going to kind of sidestep it slightly and talk about what I can tell you. We've got some real pockets of, I would say, excellence within our service, and we know we're doing particularly well in terms of some of our adolescent work, but that's part of the service, and we kind of see ourselves as the whole service, if you like. If you're thinking about the Ofsted judgments, which bits of those do you think we're closest to being good at? No, you're asking now. Okay. I think we need to be really confident in our practice and the plans that we have, and that in 3 years' time, there's no reason why we can't be on the cusp of outstanding. That's the honest answer. There are some bits that are further along, and there are some bits that we need to do some more remedial work to secure that.
Councillor Lang?
I think, to be fair to Nigel and to David, I think it's kind of hard to answer that when we can't talk openly about the Ofsted report yet. But I think the important thing to say is, because I think there's bits that, you know, I have to be careful what I say. What I would say is there has been a significant shift in terms of our ability to show our capacity to improve, and not just our capacity to improve, but our capacity to sustain that improvement. And I think then we will be able to answer your questions probably the next time we meet. But the reassurance is there around, I feel it's a very significant shift from where, you know, if you think of that Ofsted monitoring visit back in December 22 or November 22, whenever it was, we're in a very different place to where we were then. And it isn't just a matter of firefighting, it's a matter of putting in firm foundations and being able to show that that improvement work is sustainable, and we will continue in the direction of, you know, hopefully, as we say, on the cusp of outstanding at the end of our plan.
Thank you. I honestly said I wasn't fishing for Ofsted. It's just, but it's really positive, you know, in terms of the trajectory and for your sector-led improvement partner and Ofsted, what you've been able to say you're on the right track, and there's a heightened awareness and a realistic awareness of what's happening. So congratulations for that. I know that's not a question, but next meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. Councillor Tippett.
Thank you very much, Chair. My question goes back to page 54 of our packs, which is the workers know their children well point, it says here that 89% are seen on time. And so I, knowing as a member of this scrutiny committee and having spent a lot of time understanding our children in care, I know that that would be part of 490 children. So having done the maths, took that to be 53 children who haven't been seen on time. And I was just wondering whether there was anything that we were doing currently to improve that, because that's 53 individual young people that aren't being seen on time, and that's 53 lives that I would want to be doing better for.
It's a really good challenge. What I can say, the performance is better than that today. We've looked at that today. We're in at over 90% now. It's one that we constantly look at. It's one of our key obsessions in terms of CS children. Our performance actually is really strong now when we compare ourselves to stat neighbours. That said, I accept there are some children who fall into the 11%. But then one day over is also out of timescales. So it doesn't mean the children haven't been seen. It just means they haven't been seen within timescales. Sometimes that is maybe our doing. We've been called off to something else. Sometimes the young person's chosen not to see us on that day and asked us to come back another day. So we're very robust in terms of how we're monitoring it. But to give you the assurance, that kind of performance is very strong when we compare ourselves to good and outstanding and our statistical neighbours.
Thank you, Councillor Tippett. Councillor Harrison.
Thank you, Chair. Page 45, just looking at the ages of the children with a child protection plan. Just concerning to see the amount of children within the 5 to 9 age range. And is there a reason why we seem to have such a large number compared to the other age ranges? And is there any work that's doing? Obviously they're on child protection plans, so may have escalated from child in need, or may have come straight into CP. But if they're going up through the phases, shall we say, and have reached that, are we doing enough work earlier on, early help wise, with the family hubs, sort of coming through, etc., to be making sure that we're getting in there before it's escalating, and getting support from other agencies to prevent child protection being there.
Nigel.
I would expect to see that kind of profile in terms of that's where you would tend to see more children at that age, partly because you've been trying lots of other things. So you mentioned early help in our family hubs. These are children who may well have experienced those things and for whatever reason hasn't worked. So we then need to go through that stage. Early help and that offer is a key cornerstone of our priorities moving forward. We will be doing a lot more work in that space, particularly around the space that we call targeted early help, about those children who are on child protection plans, and if we don't get that right, there's a high chance they could come into our care. So we'll be looking at how we strengthen that area of work over the next phase of the improvement plan.
Councillor Lang.
Yeah, and again, in seeing things shifting and being different, the commitment to early help is really, really strong now, and having that in our plan, because it's a no-brainer, isn't it, in terms of preventative stuff and getting in to help families as early as possible. Does prevent things escalating for a child, and could hopefully will stop certain children ending up in our care eventually. So yeah, I think it's useful. It's kind of one of those things that you assume that everybody thinks and knows, but I think it's useful to say it out loud that early help is somewhere that we really need to focus and concentrate. And now we're in the next phase of this improvement work. That's going to be a big part of it.
Thank you very much. Are there any further questions there? No? I do have, it's really good to see that we're being reassured that the early intervention targets are being prioritised. That's fantastic news. I would also seek reassurance that the MASH, having been one of the big things in the report, that is also being prioritised. I'd also quite like to, it's a great, I second the fact that this was really good to look through, and I know that the work going into it is incredible. But can I ask how family hubs are feeding into this 3-year plan? And also, how are we preparing young people with skills, preparing them for adulthood post-16 in the plan? If that's okay, I probably would go to David.
So the work of the family hubs is fully integrated into the strategy and the work that we're doing in relation to, we're calling it the right help at the right time. So the city's revised early help strategy will be right help at the right time for children. And just to reassure you that family hubs are absolutely woven into that. So, for example, my leadership team meeting this morning, and the lead on that was part of that meeting when we were discussing early intervention prevention. We do need to continue to work hard to ensure that things are joined up and that things are coherent, and part of that is bringing the family hubs delivery model into delivery of early help.
Councillor Lang?
On the MASH point, the focus on it in the summer was very much a kind of all hands on deck, put all kinds of resource into it, a kind of firefighting approach. But our sector-led improvement partners have done their deep dives and looked at it, and it hasn't been a case of right, we put the resource in there, we fix it for a little bit. Again, we have good strong evidence of sustained improvement in the MASH. So and that's testament to the work of the people that work there, and I think it would be fair to say, and it's anecdotal, but my time having spent time in the MASH, that actually that monitoring visit was really quite hard for that team, and I think they can see the improvement, they can see it sustained, they can see the resource that's been put into it and how seriously it's been taken, and I think that's been really helpful for morale for that MASH team as well, and that is all part of sustaining the improvement in that area of the service.
Thank you very much, Jemima. We move on to item number 9, Key Stage 4 Outcomes Report. Before we start, could I just welcome Lisa Linscott to her first scrutiny and congratulate her for taking up the post of Senior Director for Education, Participation and Skills.
Thank you, everybody, and day 8. It's very lovely to be here and part of Plymouth's family. Thank you.
Could I please hand over to Councillor Cresswell, Cabinet Member for Education, Skills and Apprenticeship, to introduce this report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Riley, and my own welcome as well to Lisa joining us. So Key Stage 4 Outcomes Report. There are some very encouraging signs within this year's GCSE outcomes, and there's evidence of the impact of the place-based approach to school improvement in our city. And this picks up, actually, Councillor Tippett, on the question that you actually raised earlier when we were looking at the data. For example, more children are now attending schools that are rated good or better in the city, and this stands at 86.6% compared to 87.6% nationally, up from 77.1% in the 2021-2022 academic year as a result of the city's coordinated plan and clear set of priorities. And if you go back and have a look at the data, you'll also see that I think our primary schools are outperforming our actual statistical neighbours, in fact, and we've had a couple of very outstanding primary schools in terms of their Ofsted inspections, and I've been quite delighted to recently visit one of them. In improving school attendance to over 96%, putting children with SEND at the centre of school improvement plans, and third is reducing the number of children moving between schools within the academic year. This is referred to as mobility, and there's a big piece of work that's going on very much with particularly with our secondary schools, with our schools, to try and reduce that in-term mobility as far as our young people are concerned, which can have a massive impact, especially on young people who are in Key Stage 3 and particularly, in fact, of course, in Key Stage 4 when it can disrupt their GCSE years. Because of the pandemic, it's not possible to analyse trend data. This is because of the yearly changes to examination methodology that accounted for pupils' lost learning. This means that the most comparable year we have is, in fact, 2019. Now, whilst Plymouth sits below the national benchmarks for the basics benchmark, if we maintain our pace and focus through our partnership work, the gap will continue to close, and there's no reason why Plymouth children cannot perform even better than their counterparts nationally. Basically, although we're behind, our rate of increase and improvement with the data looks as if it's actually sort of like we're kind of narrowing the gap, if you like. So, for example, the percentage increase in children achieving both the standard and strong passes increased at a higher rate than the national increase. So that's the idea of narrowing our gap with our statistical neighbours, etc. Our most significant challenges, however, remain with our young people who experience disadvantage, particularly ensuring that more children achieve a strong pass in maths and English. Although the gap has narrowed with children who do not experience deprivation, on average, this group achieves 2/3 of a grade below their predicted outcomes. Now, these are really important gateway qualifications. They're key to improving social mobility. And I would also add here, it's also key to the success, as well as the success of the individual, it's key to the success of the city as well, as far as the city's economy is concerned, having highly qualified individuals. And this is a challenge that our school leaders are making every effort to tackle. Thank you.
Would anyone else like to add anything to that? Jim?
Jim Barnicott, Head of Education, Plymouth City Council. Thanks, Sally, for that really thorough introduction. I'd probably just add to that how our partnership working across the city has matured with our place-based approach with our key trusts. And that is particularly felt in the number of schools moving to good or better, particularly in the secondary phase. I can give two really strong examples of the UTC and Sir John Hunt who have moved forward, because it's from that really stable base that actually then we get better outcomes for children.
Thank you, Jim. Councillor Macleay.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to pick up on the number of pupils receiving SEN support. Currently 14.1% of pupils in Plymouth. I remember, I'm on page 66, thank you, Councillor Cresswell. From a previous scrutiny, I remember that many students were waiting a very long time for diagnosis, but I think it was maybe around 34 weeks, but I'm happy to be corrected on that. So I wonder if that percentage is actually much higher, and what work we're doing to still reduce those waiting times for an SEN diagnosis, so again, we can support them through this really important key stage.
Councillor Cresswell?
It's a very valid question, and there are certainly considerable pressures, and I think we're added to in a moment, but certainly there are considerable pressures. And one of the pressures we have is that the formal process as far as an EHCP is concerned should go through, and it should in fact be done within 20 weeks. That is, we have a lot of our EHCPs applications are not happening, and it's fair enough to say, are not happening within the 20 weeks. Although we do have, and I think it's fair to say, we have put a lot of some additional support into trying to bring that number and bring more of those actually in line to 20 weeks. This is a really important focus. It's something that we have talked about at the SEND Improvement Board, and is something that I've talked with David, with Lisa. It's something that is very key in terms of something that we have to actually, if you like, play catch up with. I think it's also fair to say is that when that doesn't happen, parents then, carers rightly make a complaint or whatever, and therefore you're then dealing with that rather than actually dealing with making sure that those EHCPs are actually processed within the time requirements that's necessary. And I think it's fair to say that this is still, in fact, a challenge, but we have sort of like, we are putting some targets in place and we are actually moving in the right direction. And as we continue to move in the right direction, that will help as well in terms of giving like further confidence, both for the staff who are processing and putting those through, and also obviously to our parents and carers and our relationships as well with our parents and carers.
Sorry, okay, Councillor McKay. Councillor Stephen.
Okay, following up the disadvantage theme, how does the local authority hold schools to account, particularly local authority schools, perhaps easier than multi-academy trust, or how they spend their pupil premium to meet the needs of children deemed as disadvantaged, and the link to academic outcomes, and also service pupil premium as well? We don't get any data for service pupils. Is there a mechanism for reporting the achievement of service pupils, which make up a significant group in the city?
Jim?
Yes, certainly. So just to start with the pupil premium spending for maintained schools and academy schools, all schools are, which are probably, John, you probably well know this bit, that they all have to produce a pupil premium report and pupil premium strategy. So for our maintained schools, we have a school improvement advisor who visits the school three times a year and carries out a whole school review. And within that, a consideration of the pupil premium strategy and the effectiveness of pupil premium spend is considered. And within that as well, within that programme, there's a full school review. So that is a robust process which is reflected in the Ofsted outcomes for our maintained schools, which are all good or better. The academy schools, that accountability is through the trust and through inspection. However, as a local authority, we also have a really sharp interest in how that money is spent and how that money is spent well. And we pick that up when we talk to our trusts through our attendance networks, where we look at how pupil premium money is spent to support attendance, to support all of those key outcomes that we look for. So we've got a multi-pronged approach for our working with our academy trusts. And also, that is also included, of course, in our place-based work and our place-based plan, because the pupil premium income is a key strand of schools funding to support disadvantaged children. So it's all included there and fully encompassed in what we do. The second part was the service premium. That is one of the strands which are currently under development at the moment, and I'm happy to report back on that as a theme if that would be helpful.
Yeah, that would be really helpful, given that it's generally for social and emotional development, but obviously there's a spin-off how children then, service children, settle into school and perform academically for their learning, so that would be helpful.
We have Michael House is the officer who has responsibility there, and there is a theme group. But what I will need to do is just go back to Michael and make sure I have all the details ready to report.
Thank you. And is it possible to collate good practice for spending of pupil premium as well, where it's actually had an impact on improving attendance, particularly?
Yeah. And there is the collation of good practice, and that happens between trusts and between maintained schools. But in particular, as the Education Endowment Foundation, which is a national research body which publishes research on what works with pupil premium spend, and that is the sort of key go-to mechanism for schools when they are looking at really good ways to make that money count and impact on the achievements of children.
Thank you. Could I ask if a link for that?
If we could just go through the chair when we make comments or questions, that would be fantastic. And if you don't mind, Councillor Stevens, I have Councillor Cresswell waiting.
I'd just add a little extra point to what Jim's explained so clearly, is that we also are doing as a team a lot of school visits, and that would be myself, David, all the team are actually going into school a great deal, and I seem to be going into schools probably about 3 times a week as it is, and that's one of those. Those are one of the areas and things that I will specifically ask about, along with special educational needs and having the sort of background that we have, and you also have done quite a few school visits as well, Councillor Stevens, and you know the sort of questions to ask, and I think this is all about trust and relationships as well with our school partners, and many of them are very keen to actually share and contribute towards good practice as well, and encouraging others to do likewise.
Thank you, Councillor Creswell. If we could getting out some examples of best practice circulated, that would be fantastic. Thank you. Councillor Harrison.
Thank you, Chair. Mine's still on pupil premium. Do we account for children and young people who were looked after, who are adopted, that are within our pupil premium? If, as a trauma-informed city, and knowing that young people and children don't suddenly, just because they become adopted, suddenly all their everything magics away, that there will be continued challenges for those children and young people and their families. So are we accounting for that within the pupil premium as well?
We do, and that will come in through corporate parents. So I'm happy to provide any updates around that to any relevant boards or panels.
Okay, thank you.
Just a quick point of clarification on that as well is that funding goes direct to schools. It doesn't come into the council.
Thank you. Any further questions? No. So I have one that may be for Lisa or for Jim. I was just wondering if there's any evidence or information regarding free school meals, and it states in the performance card and on page 66 that the expected grades are slightly lower for those on free school meals. And I just wondered if there was any kind of demographical data on that. Are there schools that perform better or worse in that area? And also with regards to free school meals, what is the number of those entitled to free school meals that are elected homeschooled? And what is the level of those who are permanently excluded from school also eligible for free school meals? Thank you.
Thanks. I don't have that specific data to hand. We can get it. What we do know is that children who experience factors of deprivation are more likely to be represented currently in the larger population of elective home-educated pupils, and we know that they are more likely to be subject to suspension and permanent exclusion, so they are a key group for us. So we do collect and analyse that data, and that we can provide that. And we can provide that analysis against the sorts of actions that we're taking.
Thank you very much. It would also be, I think, quite informative if we could work on like how that works within different schools, within different areas throughout the city.
Yes, and we've got some examples of really good practice. For example, All Saints Academy in Plymouth do some really good work with their cohort of pupils to support their achievement in school, which is again reflected by their recent Ofsted inspection, where they've become good for the first time in a really long time. So there's some excellent practice in the city that we could share.
Thank you very much. My second question is page 67 on actions, which is, it says for Jim to action, workplace-based coordinator and MAT CEOs to ensure the place-based plan continues to reflect city's priorities and such. There was an action earlier that I stated I would like a letter written to Matt. Could we extend that maybe to incorporate this as well? Would that be okay? Thank you.
Yep, that's not a problem.
Thank you very much. We're on time. We're on time. Item number 10, attendance strategy and COVID legacy issues. Can I hand over to Councillor Sally Cresswell to introduce the report? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Riley, we've discussed this quite a lot. It's something that is very dear to my heart. School attendance in post-COVID recovery. Persistent school absence, which is missing more than 10%, is the most significant ongoing impacts of the pandemic. The latest data shows that nearly 1 in 4 pupils were absent for 10% of school sessions in autumn 2022, nearly double the position in 2019. We all remain very concerned about the effect this will have on children as they move through their lives, both in terms of obviously their academic performance, but also their terms of their social and emotional well-being as well. In Plymouth, raising attendance levels is one of the 3 priorities of the place-based plan. Alongside this, we have a city attendance strategy which is focused on raising the level of attendance for key groups. For example, those children who are subject to permanent exclusions and or suspension from school. Evidence from school research, as well as our data, tells us that children who regularly are absent from school are far more likely, as I've said, to experience significant challenges in their lives. And these challenges which will lead them to not attending school. And I think that's important to bear in mind the whole importance and the role that school plays beyond just learning. There's learning for life, and there's being a very much, and a phrase that we've been using a lot is that whole phrase of actually belonging in school, and that's really important, that we belong to our communities, we belong in school. Attendance and engagement with schools is also affected by children's social, emotional and mental health needs, including the impact of COVID. A range of major factors, such as high levels of anxiety, can lead to difficulties in engaging with school routines, expectations, assessments, and sometimes resulting in emotionally based school avoidance. And an example, going into schools, as I have been going into schools a lot, one of the things that is actually coming out and heads speaking to me about are the number of young people who find it actually really terrifying to go into an exam situation and don't have the same sort of resilience and need a lot of support in order to actually go in for those sorts of exams, in order to face going in for examinations. The Plymouth City Council Special Educational Needs Graduated Approach to Inclusion outlines guidance for school staff and parents and carers. It also supports the development of nurturing approaches that promote attendance and participation. And I've seen a lot of examples of those actually in our schools across our city. Professionals from the educational, health and social care are also working with schools and families are part of this process. And I would bring back to the attendance conference, and that was a good example of sharing good practice and education professionals and such very keen to come together and share good practice and learn from other local authorities and other multi-academy trusts from outside of Plymouth that actually presented at that conference.
Thank you, Councillor Cresswell. Councillor Macleay?
Thank you, Chair. I think this is a really interesting report. I've certainly learned a lot from it. I feel like what I've learned from it is really interesting statistics around when absence occurs, particularly that jump from primary to secondary. I find that so surprising. So I think that move to Key S3 is quite stark and really noticed. Alongside all the data, what I think I would find really useful is to hear from the pupils themselves, like any kind of common themes of why that absence jumps at that stage. Is it stress? Do we need to help pupils manage their stress better at that age? Is it bullying? Do we need to support pupils better through that? Is it anything at home? Is it social pressures? You know, I feel like there's an interesting bit of work for us to do there. And I do wonder whether those themes will be picked out in the Plymouth Attendance and Inclusion Toolkit, which is referenced on page 107. I also wonder whether that will be brought to scrutiny or shared with this panel as well, just so we understand how that's being tackled on the ground.
Can I answer a bit of that?
Yes.
If I come back to, I think you're right. It's very interesting looking at the data. The piece that I particularly picked up is if you look at page 99 and the very thing you say, it's certain, there's a really interesting tracking thing there about year groups and attendance. And it's something very interesting about years 3, 4 and 5 in particular in terms of attendance. And I think there's, and this is beyond this committee, but some interesting questions to ask about the what is it about those key bits of primary education which seem to have a very positive level of attendance going on. In fact, our attendance being better than the national average. And I think there's also those key issues that you raise, which are about transitions, and there's quite a lot of work that's going on as far as transitions are concerned. It's probably fair for the majority of young people who transition from primary to secondary, there is a smooth transition. But for a number of young people, that transition is actually much more challenging, and it's a very big jump for them in going from that nurturing environment of primary school, where you have one teacher in your classroom, where you have a very good relationship, not only a very good relationship, you're very, you don't even necessarily move very much around outside of your classroom like that, and you're with the same grown-ups. So interesting, it's very interesting, and certainly the issues about transitions are something that are really being looked at and focused, also in terms of transitions as well, which I know you'll be interested in, Councillor Harrison, those transitions from nursery, preschool settings into primary settings.
Jim?
Yeah, I think just building on what Sally was saying there, the transition is key for children and young people. And one of the things that has been introduced in partnership with schools and trusts is the transitions portals, both moving into early years and also from primary into secondary. And what that does is support how schools transfer information, so strategies can be put in place for children from the very earliest point, and it just gets that consistency of practice. The evaluation for this academic year, which is the first academic year that the primary to secondary transition has been in place, is taking place now. So more than happy to provide information on that. I think that'd be really useful to do. And we are just gearing up for the first year of the primary to the inter-primary portal, where we know actually that's a real pinch point for children, particularly in terms of schools implementing reduced timetables for children, because actually their needs aren't as known as well as they could be. And again, that's a theme that's come out of our SEND inspection report, which we're working hard on to address with our partners in schools.
Can I have a supplementary, Chair? Sorry. I'm really pleased to hear that all of that targeted work is being done around transitions, because it feels like that might be the kind of lock to helping in the future career. I did just want to pick up on that attendance and inclusion toolkit. Is that available now?
Yeah, absolutely. We can circulate that. No problem at all. I knew there was something I had to say. To say yes, we will circulate.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Chair, could I just capture that action whilst we were just working something else through? So the action is on agenda item on page 107, the priority number 2, that we will circulate to all members the Plymouth Attendance and Inclusion Toolkit, so that all members can see that. Thank
you, David. I have Councillor Beer next.
Thank you, Chair. Well, it'll come as no surprise to you that I've worked very closely with children and young people in our secondary schools, and have been approached by several parents, particularly in Plymouth, with regards to children not wanting to attend school over toilet issues. What I mean by that is that young people do try as much as possible to use the facilities during their break times, but it's often oversubscribed. They can't get in there, so consequently they're coming out of lessons to go to the toilet, which I understand. I also understand how disruptive to education that can be, so we accept that. But the anxiety in and around that is causing young people not to necessarily attend school. And I've experienced young people who are, particularly for young girls, who at certain times of the month won't even attempt to come to school because of the lack of being able to go to the toilet when they need to go to the toilet. And I could give some very graphic examples that I have, which I've already shared with some of the team. But this again is causing an anxiety that's preventing young people from attending school. Chair, I'd like to put on the work programme for next year a discussion in and around policies regarding toileting in schools, particularly our senior schools that affect in the main young women, but I understand there are some examples I've given for young men as well who have had issues in school, which has caused and created an anxiety and a mental health issue within a young person to stop them from wanting to come to school. And that's very sad. We can't go back to the draconian days where, oh, we've got a period, so actually for 7 days I can't go to school because I can't leave my house. Can we? We need to be able to make sure those young people have the facilities to be able to use them. And if they need to use them during a lesson time, then so be it. But I mean, obviously, if there's a set pattern where you've got a particular person who's constantly going out, then actually your alarm bell goes and there's an issue, and then you can talk to the parents about it and have a frank discussion. But at the moment, that's not happening in senior schools in Plymouth. Thank you.
David, would you like to come in on that?
Just to assure you, Councillor Beer and the Scrutiny Committee, that this is a live issue in discussion and challenge with particularly our secondary schools. So on all of our visits, we are challenging schools and we're having conversations about the issue that is being raised and how we expect them to address it and how they are addressing it. Councillor Creswell and I were on a school visit yesterday and we raised the issue and we had a very helpful and instructive conversation with the head teacher, who was able to give us some examples of where that particular school has responded to student voice and made some changes in relation to their practice as a result of what the students have fed back to them. So it's also a topic of that the young safeguarders are addressing, and they've written to all of the head teachers in the city with regards to their outcomes of a survey that they did of young people. The next step on that is for the chair of the safeguarding board to go to meet with the secondary head teachers as a group to feed those comments in. So if that is something that the Scrutiny Committee would want to consider going forward into the work programme for next year, then of course that can go forward for consideration.
Thank you, Chair. That's excellent that we're hearing some positive stuff coming out of this. I'm building on what Councillor Macleay has said, you know, getting young people here and listening to their issues of what's happening within their school environment and what's their obstacles to attending school. I've just raised one issue, and that's toileting, and I'm glad and refreshed to hear that things are moving forward with that. But I would like to keep a firm finger on the pulse, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Thank you, Councillor Beer. We'll go through the work programme a little bit later. That's okay, but thank you very much for raising that. Councillor Creswell.
Just on a sort of reassurances, as I keep saying, I've been going into a lot of schools, and one of the things that you pick up as you walk around a school, you get a feeling about a school, you get a feeling about a school in terms of how focused the learning is that's going on, but very much about the relationships that exist between young people and the adults who are in those schools. And I have to say, I've recently I've been to school with David, and this particular issue that you raised was discussed, but also going and walking around in schools, and there's been young people in a very organised way who are actually in the corridors during lesson time, who are coming back from having visited the toilet or having been to the toilet, and there doesn't seem to be, I haven't experienced, and this has been during actual teaching and learning time. So just to reassure you, I think this is something that is being addressed, but it might be very interesting to have young people here to actually talk to us about some of those barriers to attendance, or some surveys about those barriers to attendance that young people feel, and some of the stresses and such that I think young people experience perhaps much more so than a generation that we probably went through, or certainly I went through.
Chair, I just wanted to also add there as an example, I've heard of a young man who's had to leave the classroom to go to the toilet and went to the first available toilet because it was a bit of an emergency, and ended up getting a detention for doing that. We shouldn't be punishing young people for things like that. And I think that would be an issue that we would welcome here on our scrutiny panel if we had young people here to tell us how they feel about it. And I think that would be a good way forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Beer. I do have something that I want to bring up when we come to the work programme, and I'd be happy to discuss it then if that's okay. Thank you. Councillor Carlisle.
Thank you, Chair. I've just got two questions. There might be me not be able to see it, but do we have the figures of how many children are being homeschooled? Because I know we had an increase from COVID and we were working to try and bring them back to school. I think that kind of tallies in sometimes with the absences. And there was just one other thing, just sorry, me doing a double pronged. One of them is on page 86, table 1, the persistent absence looks very good because we've, on the percentages, we're going down. But the severe absence has gone up, and I'm just wondering, has some of them tipped over from persistent to severe as well? That's okay. Sorry, Chair, let me doing two questions.
That's okay. Is that Hannah?
I can certainly answer the first one for you around elective home education, and I can tell you that as at the end of the Q3 period, there was 541 pupils electively home educated, and that was an increase on the previous year when there was 396. So we have got quite a significant increase in the number of elective home educated pupils. What we are seeing as a result of a hangover from COVID, I think, is the number of SEND pupil or decisions being made around elective home education for our SEND pupils, and that is also being addressed within the whole wider work programme that we've got on SEND improvement.
Anybody else like to come in on that thing?
And then also one about persistence.
Oh.
There's a persistence to severe.
Yeah, who would? The persistence?
Sorry, if you could repeat the second part of the question. Thank you.
Thanks, and thanks, Hannah, for the first one. That's quite it's quite an increase, isn't it, in homeschooling? And that's why I'm wondering if part of the absence is that's gonna come back a little bit, isn't it, at one point? But the second one I did have was the persistence absence to increase to severe absence. So obviously the persistence we've gone down, but the severe we've gone up. And is that because the children are now turning severe?
Is that because of children?
Is that now because the previous ones who were persistently absent of less than 90% have now gone to less than 50% absence?
They do tend to be the same children. So the persistent absent cohort, they're the same children as those then with severe absence cohort. So yes, if you're a persistent absentee, you're also a severe absentee. It just means that your actual attendance as a persistent absenteeer is less than 50%. And so we are seeing an increase in that, particularly at our secondary level, and again at those transition phases, particularly from Key Stage 2 to Key Stage 3.
Jim?
One of the key things that we're doing across the city is our attendance networks with schools and trusts and partners. We've had a particular focus on belonging and getting really clear messages to families that school is a place where belonging is really important and key, and that families and schools are welcome. We had our first attendance conference in November, which was really well received, and we had regional best practice in and around communication to families to encourage children to attend really well, because what we found both locally and nationally is messages that highlight, you miss a lesson, your grade is affected by, don't necessarily work. It's much more around this is where this is who we are as a school, and you are really welcome here. So I think some of that work is starting to take effect, and that's why we've seen increases in our persistent absence rate improve, because we know that schools have taken that feedback on board and adapted their practice accordingly, which is really positive.
Can I? Thank you. I have Councillor Tibbets.
Thank you very much. My question follows on from Councillor McClay's question. I know that this, this particular question then shouldn't be reported back publicly if any outcomes, but if there could be anything looked into, particularly of attendance of LGBTQ plus students. I know that there is a particular issue of increased bullying for students who identify as LGBT plus in schools at the moment, most notably because of the rise in hate in our national media. So could anything be done to kind of investigate that and support schools in tackling that specific bullying? Because at the end of the day, we don't want children not coming to school because they just want to be themselves.
Thank you, Councillor Tibbets. Jim?
I think there's some work we can certainly do there. One would be, again, as Councillor V has pointed out, around the importance of student voice, and the second is talking to our schools to understand, what their view is on what they see day to day. So yes, that can be taken forward.
So I suggest we take that through the LGBTQ plus young people's group, because that's the right route for that. So if officers liaise with the participation team for that, and then we need to use that group to understand what their current issues are with relation to the issues that you've raised, and then there is the opportunity for them to come back, if Scrutiny so wish, during the course of next year to talk and feedback. And we'll always then parallel that with feeding the items that we agree here back through and into the head teacher and senior leader networks. So we'll run that in parallel.
Thank you, David. Is that okay? I have Councillor Stevens.
Thank you. In the autumn, there was a good promotion of good attendance through social media, etc. And I'm wondering if and there's some small green shoots here that something is happening positively. Is there any worth exploring media opportunities for children and families who have actually returned to school to share that, the difference it's made and for some families it might be a harder thing? And also, is there any partnership with GPs, school nurses, places like that actually, when children who are off school and they have appointments during the school day, is there any scheme that GPs or whoever can actually engage with families about attendance subtly? I know there's sensitivities around this and safeguarding issues, and also for notices to go up anywhere where young children and teenagers are, youth clubs, libraries, soft play centres, etc., promoting attendance, the benefit of being in school when you should be, rather than just on educational premises.
Jim?
The media campaign that we had at the beginning of the academic year had some positives, but it also had, I think, and that's what I think what you just said about the voice of families and children and young people is actually really important, because it can come across as being a bit sort of, I'm talking to parents, and it can come across as being a bit sort of like hectoring in some ways, which I wouldn't want to be in any way whatsoever. But this whole big theme that we've been talking very much more about, this thing about belonging and about having how really we want you in school, you need to be in school because this is where you belong. And we've had some sort of advertisements and things that we have put out which have shown things like a school production, and there's someone sort of silhouetted out, and of course if they're silhouetted out you can't have the proper school production, you can't have a proper full team if everyone isn't actually in school. So I think that's why it's very important, some of these very nuanced ways that we talked about at the attendance conference, about making those young people and children feeling very much sort of welcomed into school, that whole sort of welcoming, that very gentle start for the day. One of the reasons why breakfast clubs are actually so important is because they have that sort of that gentle, nurturing start, in fact, to the day. The other thing about messages, I don't know how many about messages going out on a broader scale, because this is attendance, as we keep saying, attendance is everyone's concern. It's not just the concern of us, it's everyone's concern. Whether we actually have some of that happening already, or whether there's an opportunity to expand that sort of advertisement.
Jim.
We ran an attendance campaign in the summer term, which was really successful because we learnt a lot about the kind of messages which families are receptive to and which they are not receptive to. So again, when as part of our campaign, which we co-designed with schools, we did have messages around, a child misses a school day, that will result in lost learning and lost exam grade. Those messages didn't really cut through at all. But what really did work was we took videos of head teachers and school practitioners talking about their experiences, and that picked up coverage in the local media. And we also then fed into the DFE's most recent campaign because they were interested in our experiences and our campaign as well. So we've had some real success there. And in addition to that, one of the things that we looked at the November attendance conference was how the Cabot Learning Federation, which is a Bristol-based multi-academy trust, had used a youth video and video children talking about their experiences, about what it was like before when they weren't attending and why, and then what it was like when they were attending. So those are models of practice which we've introduced into the city. Now, we're not in our next attendance network in this half term. You're absolutely right, Councillor Stevens, we need to revisit that and look at how we embed that practice.
Could I just ask, would it be possible to share, are there any of those things that could in fact be shared at all, Jim, with this committee? Because I've obviously seen them, and they are really, really sort of positive, great messages to actually get out there.
Yes, but certainly we can share the materials from the attendance conference.
Thank you. I have Councillor Harrison and then Councillor Beer, and I'm going to draw questions to the close so we can get ready for our visitors. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. My question, page 87, where you talk about SEN support. Thinking about and going back to what we were talking about before in terms of children that are elective home educated, what work is being done where we have children with SEND who are not attending school and families, carers are electing to home educate because the provision is not there. I happened upon a young person today with a carer not in school because of SEND, for SEND reasons, because there isn't, school provision for them in their current situation. That carer would love to have that young person back in school, but if there's no provision and these young people are included in our absence, or non-attendance, or just electing therefore because it's too difficult to home educate, and potentially not getting the provision that they need, what work is being done?
Jim?
Okay, so I'll probably split that question into two parts. So one will be around those young people who have special educational needs but don't have an educational health and care plan, and then those young people that do, because we have different processes in place. And Claire, could I ask you to pick up on the ones with education, health and care plans? So for children who are electively home educating, who have special educational needs, we have a team, an elective home education team, who can offer support and advice. And what we will do in particular is, if it is a decision of the family, a positive decision that actually elective home education is right for them, then they can obviously, should they choose, draw upon the resources and the support of that team. If it is a family where elective home education feels for them like it's something where they had no choice, then what we look to do is work closely with the family to understand the needs of the the child and to reintegrate them back into school and find ways to get them back into school as quickly as possible. So it very much is dependent on the circumstance, but what I can assure you is that the support is there, and at all points we look to have a constructive dialogue, which is either, yes, this is a positive decision that's been made, or no, actually, there is a need for this young person to return to school, and we will support that process.
So, Chair, just coming back on that, so you're working positively with all families?
So that's children without, and what I've covered there is children without a plan. So I'll just hand over to my colleague Claire for children who may be in that sort of circumstances where you've mentioned that there may not be provision, but those children are likely, they may well have an EHC plan.
So for those children who have an EHC plan but whose parents choose to electively home educate them, that can be for quite a wide variety of reasons. But I think what you're raising are those families who feel they have to have their children at home because they haven't got the right kind of support in school. So we have, if a child has an education, health and care needs plan, we have a duty as a local authority in partnership with other professionals to meet the needs and the strategies outlined in that plan, and that plan needs to be reviewed at regular intervals, certainly at least annually, but before then, if it's felt that those needs aren't being met. So our 0 to 25 statutory assessment team would be in dialogue with parents about trying to find appropriate provision, trying to support reintegration back into mainstream with the help of our SEND advisory teams like the Educational Psychology Service, using a reintegration plan, or to look for appropriate specialist provision, which I know can be difficult in some circumstances and in some particular areas of need. It's really important for us to work closely with health colleagues as well, where we might be looking at children on the autistic continuum who are receiving support and guidance through our health colleagues, and also those children with social, emotional, mental health needs with high levels of anxiety. And there's another group actually where children are on a roll of a school, so they're not classed as being electively home educated, but they have very poor attendance because of high levels of anxiety. And the same processes for both of those groups of children that we've described need to apply to those children too. And we have produced detailed guidance for children themselves, young children and older young people, and also parents and carers, to try to develop a shared understanding of the protective factors within school that can support reintegration, but also an understanding of what factors draw children away from school. The reinforcing factors perhaps have not been at school, and many of the issues that have come up in our discussions, like fear of not fitting in, fear of bullying, post-COVID, fear of not being able to complete the work at the expectation level required. Those are all things that we feed into our emotionally based school avoidance guidance, which we could share with you.
Councillor Cresswell.
I was just going to give an example of that, the emotionally based avoidance, particularly related to learning, and a lot more work. I've been talking to a lot of teachers and heads, and a lot more work is being done with young people in terms of looking specifically at those GCSE questions, which actually are the 20-mark questions, which actually are proving to be a real challenge for a lot of young people now, and needing to have those things sort of broken down into small chunks so that they can actually feel that success and to actually succeed, because for a lot of young people, or a number of young people, those are actually proving to be quite challenging, and can also be challenging not just in fact for those children who actually struggle academically, but can actually also be challenging for young people who actually are very successful academically, if they feel that their confidence, they're not perhaps, I think COVID has actually left a lot of children and people perhaps generally not as resilient as they were in the past.
Thank you, Councillor Cresswell. Councillor Beer.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, my question is going to be a plain and simple one, following on from what Councillor Harrison's been asking regarding SEND places. Do we have enough SEND places within Plymouth to accommodate all those young people who do desperately need the places? Because I too have examples in my ward where I've got a SEN school which is oversubscribed because of the volume of people who want spaces within the school environment and can't get them. So are we going to create more spaces? Thank you.
Would like to take that?
Yes, I mean, an overall answer, and then if there's anything. So the short answer is that the city doesn't have enough places. So we've a focused piece of work which is building places now, immediately, and setting out a longer term strategy. We've done the data analysis in terms of what the longer term need is through at the moment until 2030 or 2031. We're just getting that data through so that we can set out what the needs are against each category of special educational needs, and then to be able to build the strategy on that. Amanda Paddison, one of our senior colleagues, is working really hard currently to front load that in relation to capacity for September 24, because we've got to do both. We've got to get capacity now, and we've also got to set out the longer term strategy. So it is a real live priority for the Directorate currently.
Thank you, David. Is that okay? Councillor Cresswell.
Just a couple of things to add to that as well. And I think we did have a discussion about looking at SEND provision, and have had a debate, I think, at the last scrutiny meeting. But one of the things we did talk about there is, and there's a lot of work going on talking to heads and MATCEOs, etc., looking at where there might be the possibility for provision in terms of satellite provision within our existing schools. We have there are going to be falling roles numbers as far as primary schools are concerned. So looking at satellite provision, something that I know that Councillor Stevens is particularly keen on is ideally trying to keep as many young people and as many children as possible within their communities. It's really important about keeping young people as much as possible within their communities. It certainly makes things much easier as far and cheaper as far as school transport is concerned. And I think the other important thing to look at as well is that a really good piece of work that Lisa MacDonald is doing, which is on the graduated approach, because actually what we really need to do, if we're really thinking about inclusion, we need to make sure that we keep as many young people and children as possible within our mainstream schools, and that we're actually providing for them. Having an EHCP isn't a sort of a panacea and you know, and solves the problem. It's actually making sure that we have the right provision in the right place and along the right continuum as far as the needs of our children and young people are concerned. So it's actually a whole big package coming together of making sure that we use our resources effectively and make sure that we deliver the right things for all our young people. And long term, what we should be looking for is not just about the one-way process of young people going into specialist school provision, but also the fact of that there is actually, and for some children will always need to be within a very, very specialist setting, but also about that provision, in fact, for some young people being able to come back in and come back into mainstream school as well.
Thank you very much. I just have one question. Is there a detailed action plan in place to deliver priorities set out in the strategy? Jim, sorry.
The actions are set out at the end of the strategy, and we're working towards those. But they have not been, because the strategy is fairly new. Our next stage would be then to build those within the timelines that we would expect them to be delivered. So we've got our priority ones at the moment, which I included in my report. But the strategy stands as the action plan currently.
So can I recommend that we have an action plan, which is the action plan that delivers the strategy, and that's presented to members as soon as that's completed?
That would be really good, thank you. Thank you. You've got that. So I'm going to take a little bit of a break while we get ready for the young people that are coming in. How long did we say? 10 minutes. If we could be back in 10 minutes, that would be great. Could I just also reiterate, these young people may have some communication, and have a little bit of patience, please, and allow people to speak. Thank you. Start with, is it not? Okay, that's perfect.
So hi, I'm Helen Huntley. I'm the team manager of PIAS, which is Plymouth Information Advice and Support for SEND Service, and we host Youth Ascends. There's also a couple of people watching online that didn't want to come down, so they may put some questions in the text as we go along as well. Thank you.
Hiya, I'm Nicole and I am the children and young people worker for PIAS. So I started this group about 6 years this year on gathering the views of the young people. So yeah, some of them have been with me for the 6 years and some of them have just joined quite recently as well.
I'm Henry and I've been in the group for around sort of 5 to 6 years. Yeah.
Hello, I'm George and I've been in this group since 2018.
Hi, I'm Anna. I've been since I came here when I was, how long have I been there? A couple of years, and it's really good. All right.
Hello, I'm Morgan and I joined around this year, so I'm quite recent.
Hi, I'm Alfie and I just joined by last September.
Hi, I'm Natanya. I've been a part of Youth Sends for about 5-6 years.
Thank you very much for coming and introducing yourself. I would just like to hand over to Councillor Cresswell.
I think before we start, would it be polite for us to introduce ourselves as well? Especially as these young people have done such an excellent job at introducing themselves, we want to do the same. So if I start with myself, I'm Councillor Sally Creswell and I am the Cabinet Member for Education, Skills and Apprenticeships.
Hi, my name's Mike Page. I'm Funding and Partnerships Manager within the team, but I'm also, for the purposes here, I'm the SEND Improvement Plan Project Manager.
Hello, I'm Lisa Lynn Scott and I'm the Service Director for Education, Participation and Skills, and I have been here for 8 days.
And I've met some of you before when I came to Youth Ascends just after. I remember meeting Natanya and Alfie and Henry as well when I was first appointed to Plymouth. So I'm David Haley, I'm the Director of Children's Services.
Hello, I'm Jake Metcalf, I'm the Democratic Advisor.
Hi, I'm Zoe. I'm one of the City Councillors and I am the Chair of this Scrutiny Committee. Oh.
Hello, I'm Councillor Charlotte Carlisle and I'm the Deputy Chair of the Scrutiny Committee.
Hello, I'm Councillor Terry Beer and I've been in and out of this scrutiny panel since 2007. So I'm coming up for about 19 years service on the council. So welcome and thank you for coming in today.
Hello, I'm Angela Penrise. I'm the opposite really. I'm one of the newer councillors. I haven't been on very long, so I'm longing to hear what you've got to say because I've got a lot to learn. Thank you very much.
My name's John Dingle. I'm a councillor for St Buda Ward, and like Angela, I'm very new to all this as well, and I'd like to welcome you all here today.
Hello everyone, my name is Councillor Dylan Tippett and I'm coming up to the halfway point of my first term on the council.
Hello all, my name is Councillor John Stevens and I'm new to this as well, but in a former life I was George's head teacher for 6 years. So it's good to see you, George.
Hello, I'm Councillor Natalie Harrison. I'm Councillor in Plimpton and I'm Shadow Cabinet Member for Education and Skills. And I'm in my first term as well, coming up to the end of my first term as a councillor.
Hello, I'm Councillor Lauren McClay. I'm also quite new and I'm very jealous. You all got the hang of the microphones much quicker than I did. And it's so lovely you could be here with us today. I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say.
I'm Councillor Jemima Lang and I'm Deputy Leader of the Council and I have what they call a portfolio, so the Cabinet responsibility for children's services. And yeah, absolutely thrilled that you're here today. Thank you for coming. Can't wait to hear how you put us through the ringer.
And I know you know who I am. I had the pleasure of meeting you and walking you through the improvement plan and getting the accessible plan together. And I learned an exceptional amount from you all. And I'm so excited to see that you're here today to pass on some of that learning to my colleagues.
Thank you very much. Could I hand back over to Helen, please?
Thank you. We also have two young people watching. So James and Adam are upstairs with Steve and Louisa. So they may put some comments in as well. Yeah. So thank you. We've put a presentation together, which I hope Jake is going to share. And then I'm going to hand you over to the young people. They've all...
Sorry, my mistake. I would like to hand over to Councillor Cresswell, who is the Cabinet for Education and Skills. It's my fault, Helen, not yours. Sorry.
I'll just do a brief introduction because I've seen some... It's your computer. Because I've seen some of your questions, so I'm actually feeling very nervous. So I'm pleased to report back on the progress with the delivery of the SEND improvement plan since the committee last met on Tuesday, the 7th of November. Since we last met, the accessible plan has been co-produced with officers and Youth Ascends, and Youth Ascends is the SEND Youth Forum for Plymouth. It's hosted and supported by Plymouth Information Advice and Support for SEND Service, PIAS, and members of the Youth Ascend are with us today, and very nice to have you here as well, and they have prepared a number of questions that they would like to ask of us all, and I look forward to that discussion. We also have a briefing report updating progress in the delivery of the plan. This focuses on the cross-sectoral governance and the implementation of a 6-weekly report cycle to measure and monitor progress. It also updates on a number of key issues, including co-production, multi-agency assessment and support plan rationalisation of the DFE, that's the Department of Education, deep dive, monitoring visits and professional learning and development. We've also recently recruited an independent chair of the SEND Improvement Board, who is Karen Bradshaw. And Karen was previously the Executive Director of Children's Services for Shropshire. She did the same job as David Haley does here in Plymouth, and brings a wealth of experience and knowledge, and I'm delighted that she is helping us out. But I'm going to hand back over here because we start with the young people, and we are very pleased that you're with us today.
Thank you, Councillor Cresswell. Helen.
Thank you for inviting us. So I'm going to hand over to Nats, I think. So I think that's on slide 2 or 3, if you just go through. Over to you, Nats.
So we are Youth Sense Plymouth Special Education Needs Disabilities Youth Forum. It's explained in that video. Is it all right if you open that? Should it load?
just say, but all the animations on that were done by Nats, so she wouldn't say, so she did.
Cut this a little bit closer. You, yeah. You told us you would put us at the heart of everything you do, help us much earlier, work together to help us stay in school, work together to support us when we are waiting for the care we need, ensure we get the additional specialist help and support when we need to live away from Plymouth, ensure we constantly get the right help at the right time, reduce the long waiting times for the care we need, make sure everyone working with us has the right training and development, and ensure the right services and support is in place for the future.
So our young people, because of those commitments, our young people have come up with 7 questions, and they may have additional questions to talk about those commitments really. So I will hand over to Anna for the first question.
Hello. I haven't heard or seen anything about the commitments in school. What are you doing to tell everyone about them?
Thank you, Anna. I've got to say these are very, very searching questions. They're excellent questions. So my answer to this, and it's probably not a full answer, and you probably want to hear more as well, but the Accessibility SEND Improvement Plan was approved by the SEND Improvement Board on December 2023. Pius is taking on the maintenance and updating of the accessibility plan. However, we recognise there's work to be done on sharing and communication, and we will pick this up at our next strategic delivery group on the 14th of March and develop a plan for a full rollout. And I think this is actually what you've actually picked up is actually a really significant issue and something that we need to be looking at, because very often things happen and go on and they don't always get communicated back to the right people. And it's actually a major challenge, not just in this, but in other things as well. And you've picked up on a really important nub and a really important issue. And it's probably something that we ought to be perhaps taking back to our SEND Improvement Board to make sure that we are actually making sure that things get fed back. Sometimes people attend meetings, but they don't always feed everything back, don't necessarily get fed back to all the grown-ups, let alone everyone else who's actually within an organisation.
Thank you. How will you ensure that leaders in the city are watching over the plans properly?
Another very good question. The plan is overseen by the SEND Improvement Board, which has an independent chair, and I mentioned just now that is Karen Bradshaw. All right. There's political people on that board, so people like myself and Councillor Lang and such, and Zoe as well. Councillor Zoe as well is also on that board, and so we have so there's senior council leaders, and there's also health. There's people from schools, and it's got representation from Pius and also from Plymouth Parent and Carer Voice as well. The board meets every 6 weeks to review progress and take action when it's needed. And the board reports to the highest levels of local bodies, which includes the Plymouth City Council Cabinet, the National and the NHS Integrated Care Board. And probably important to say that that everyone in the council knows really how important this is, and how important it is that that we are watching over the plans and making sure that they aren't just plans, because it's easy to write things down, but making sure that they actually move forward and they have an impact. And in many ways, you are the key people on this, because you are the people who know whether our plans are actually making a difference to your lives and things for you. So really important. It isn't just monitoring at that level in the council, but also what's really happening on the ground as well.
Could I just bring Jemima in for
I only want to add that obviously Councillor Creswell and I are on it, and Councillor Riley, because we are involved with children's things, but also the leader of the whole council was also on that board because it. Did you? Oh, I didn't think you did. I do apologise. Well, it's worth.
No, I said the opposition leader as well as.
Oh, sorry. Yes, the opposition leader. So it's the whole council know about this and care about this and spend, big chunks of their time at those meetings because they want to be there. So I think it's really important that you know that it's the top level of leadership in the council that goes.
So, what is it you're doing to make sure that every classroom is a place where children belong and learn with the right support?
That's another excellent question, because that's where the most important things that go on are actually in those classrooms. And I can say that because I used to be a teacher. I was a primary school teacher, and obviously you know that John Stevens was of course a teacher, and in fact. Both David and also Lisa were also in fact teachers as well. I don't know if we've got any other teachers in the room. So we actually know what's really important that goes on actually in classrooms. And there is work that's being done at the council level on something which is called the graduated approach. That's making sure that in schools we actually have an approach to special educational needs in which we're supporting young people and making sure we've got the best support for young people all the way through. It's now in a final draft form, and it's going to be a new website is going to be set up and launched in May, and that's being developed in consultation with families and children. And it's really as well to help teachers and teaching assistants and all those people to better be able to work to support yourselves and to support other SEND young people and children. The aim of the graduated support approach is to support professionals, to support the teachers and the teaching assistants, and so that they know better what they should actually be doing, because they don't always. We don't always have the answers and we don't always know. So we actually have to work together to make sure that we do have more answers and we're able to work better. And that's why some of the things that you're actually putting forward become really important, because they help to improve how teachers and teaching assistants in fact can work. The graduated approach also sets out the role of the wider support service to provide professional development and support for school workforce. So it might be within both school but also beyond school as well.
I don't think other children know about autism, ADHD and other disabilities. How will teachers stop children bullying children with special education needs?
Really, really important. And what goes on, again, we come back to what goes on in the classroom, what goes on in school. So in the improvement programme, the specialist support services, so that's the educational psychologists and specialist teachers service and special school outreach, and alongside health professionals, will work more closely with schools to provide support and advice in relation to specific special needs. The team are building on the consultation-led model of delivery, where the educational psychology service, so the educational psychologist comes in and meets individually with schools to discuss whole schools and individual children's needs. And this is now being further developed to include the wider specialist services to ensure class teachers, so about class teachers, come back to classes, class teachers have the right approach and they have the right tools and they know about the right thing of support and what they can do at the right time. Be really important to hear a bit more from you about this. The team would be really interested to hear more incidences of bullying and how we can work together to actually address them. I think on an aside, it's probably about making other children aware, is that in my experience when I worked in school, is that when you're in a classroom in a primary school, everyone knows you and such, and you know what people's strengths and what people's weaknesses are. And I think sometimes it probably can be more difficult when you go in perhaps into a bigger environment or whatever, where there's more people to know and more people to get on with, and it can be much more difficult and much more challenging. But I think what's really important here, and for you to take back, and we should be taking this back, this is really about pupil voice, because that's a really, really important question. And we need to take that back, I think, in terms of pupil voice, and within schools, perhaps that's something that school councils and such could be talking about themselves, and what they can actually do, what can be done to improve that. Because we could perhaps do with a kind of like a wider discussion, both in your schools and amongst ourselves as well, of how we can best support schools and also other pupils as well, to make sure that we do actually make sure that we deal with bullying and it's talked about and sorted.
How will you make sure that teachers know about special education need in schools and college?
Well, that's something that I've just talked about a little bit, which is something which is called the graduated approach. So that's working with. So we've got a member of our team called Lisa McDonald, and she's doing a lot of really, really good work on something which is called the graduated approach, and with Senko networks to provide school with a framework so as to help towards professional development in school. In short, she's actually working and putting a whole program of like learning together to help to teach teachers better. So it isn't just about you people in school learning and learning as young people. It's also about teaching teachers better so that they can actually do their job better and have perhaps better things within classrooms which are adapted, which would be more useful and helpful to help you learn. So it's learning for adults as well as learning for young people as well.
What are you doing to increase transparency on waiting lists?
Right, this is a real challenge for me. So I have to say, I've been given an answer to this one, because this is a really big, complicated issue. We've got waiting lists for all sorts of things. The government has got waiting lists for people going into the health who need treatment as far as hospitals are concerned. So this is a really, really big problem. So this is the answer I've got, which I'll hopefully provide some answers, but I'll do my best here. So we have a whole work stream looking into waiting times as part of the SEND improvement plan. And these are the following things we are committed to. Setting standards for how we communicate, how we deal with people and how are waiting. We'd like to cooperate with children and with young people and parents and carers. We need to do a lot, and needs to be a lot to improve our communication as well. Improving the data that we share with the local authority and local area through routine inputs on dashboards and through process and meetings such as scrutiny committees. If I just explain this a bit, I'm actually giving an answer here from the health service rather than from the council. So in the health service, they're also working to understand how to ensure that those with the most needs are prioritised within waiting lists. So making sure that people who have the greatest need go to the top then of the waiting list. Co-producing, that means what would help children and young people, parents and carers while they're waiting. So what things can help to support families and children and carers while people are waiting, or they're waiting to be seen and looked at. And working to reduce waiting times and bring assessment and carers closer to schools and communities. It says here that some waiting lists are now published nationally, such as the Children's Mental Health Service waiting times, and that's actually a long digital link, in fact, into that. So those answers can actually be given to you, and obviously, knowing Natalia, your excellent use of ICT, you'll be able to access those particular websites.
So how will you make the transition from children to adult services easier?
That's another very, very good question, and one that we have. These are all things that are really fundamental to sort of the work that we do and how we have to act and working together and such. And they show a real insight from you in terms of the quality of your questions. So we are working with the, so that's health as well, working with the educational healthcare plan team and our specialist teams in education and social care to develop an improved programme which will ensure that the right professionals, so that the right people actually work closely with us, with schools and with families and with young people, and starting that work in year 9. We know we have a lot of work to do to get this right going forward, and we're putting a very high priority onto this area. Those last 2 questions are very much really from a health perspective rather than from an education perspective. But thank you very much.
Sorry, I have added a couple questions myself, just based on what you said. So you mentioned about the staff training. Is there any way that Youth Voice could be included in this work with like resource creators?
I think that's actually a really, really good suggestion, and that's absolutely excellent. And perhaps that could in fact be put in, and some of you could actually trial things and give us feedback as to as to what they're, you know, as to what they're like and such. And you obviously have got you've got some people here who could do some excellent graphics and all sorts of stuff. So there could be some really good quality provision.
Sorry, there's a couple more.
Can we put that in as a point, please, David? Can that be added?
I mean, that is a really helpful offer, because to have Your Voice developing the training, learning and development training materials, both for schools and for our own people that work within our own local authority services, would be really, really helpful. And, you know, there's, in a sense, there's no bounds to how far that could go in terms of how you would like to be involved in terms of developing the materials, shaping the materials, contributing to the delivery of the materials, etc., and so using some of, you know, Natania's excellent graphics. I think that would be really great. So that's something we will absolutely take forward with you.
And so I have someone on screen that wants to ask a question. Would you like me to ask it for you, or are you happy to ask it yourself? Okay, that's no problem. Change my glasses. Do you have an estimate when these promises will be fulfilled?
Oh, that's a very, very difficult one. We are gradually working through things. I cannot give you a full estimate when everything would be fulfilled. But we are working to a timetable of certain things that we have to do, because we had a SEND inspection, and it was not very good. We did not come out. The local area SEND inspection was not good, and recognised that there was lots of work that we had to do. So we have to make sure that we get some things in place for when the inspection team comes back again, which will be probably in January of next year. So we need to make sure that we are actually working at pace to make sure we have things in place then. But actually it isn't about making sure that things are there for the inspectors. It's making sure that things are in place to make things better for our children and our young people who in our city and in our city schools and in our community. And that's really what drives us and makes us work. And I think if you're able to make some contributions, some very positive contributions, we should hopefully be able to move that forward at perhaps a faster rate. And you will be able to make comments and such about how well you think that we are doing, and give us an input, and be able to say to us about how you think we're doing in terms of supporting you. I think this is very much a two-way relationship here.
I've got two more, sorry. So my next question is about the criteria for help within schools and outside of schools. Is there any way that this criteria could be, say, lowered, or because all too often you find that, you know, you're not bad enough, or not, your case isn't serious enough for one service, but it's too serious for another service.
Again, that's something that we were actually talking about a little bit. We were talking about just now, and it's about having, if you like, that what you were asking for and talking about is having that consistency, I think, as well. And one of the things that we are working on is something called sort of early intervention, because sometimes what can happen is that someone has a particular issue, problem, or whatever it might be with special educational needs, and because there isn't something that comes in as early as possible, as young as possible, then that can then become more and more serious, and it means you can't make the necessary progress. So one of the big things that we have, and a big emphasis we have on, is actually making sure having a priority is about early intervention and giving support to our young people and also to parents and carers as early as we possibly can. Again, that's an aspiration. We certainly haven't managed to achieve all of that. But certainly those criteria, and I think that's probably what's important as well about the graduated approach, is that if we make sure that teachers and teaching assistants and those who are working in school, and all teachers, not just teachers who do special groups or special educational needs, all teachers need to know about special educational needs and about SEND and about supporting young people in school, so that as many as possible remain in class and in mainstream school and are fully included. Anything you'd like to add, David?
So I think that is something that we also need to talk with health about. So we have asked for people that live that work within the health service to contribute to the answers to the questions. So some of the questions they've also made their comments in, which is helpful. But I think there's absolutely room for them to come and talk with you and with your group, and to get some more specific examples of what would be really helpful and what your experiences are to inform their practice. So I think in the programme going forward, we can bring that in most definitely.
Final question I've got. So it was mentioned about talking to young people. Do you have any particular methods to do this, or is it discussed in a classroom environment? I just worry about the students that may not feel safe discussing this in front of their peers, or students that are homeschooled, for example.
I think that's a very, very valid question about making sure that people feel actually comfortable, because I have to say, I think coming into this environment to talk to us is really, this is a big formal committee meeting, in fact, and certainly other environments would be, and I think we need to have that as another point that we actually look at about seeking out and talking to young people in what's the most suitable and comfortable environment for them. I can also say that these questions that I've just had have been some of the I'm feeling very nervous, but I think what you've said is absolutely right, that we want to be in you want to be in a sort of comfortable environment, and school isn't always the best place for, school isn't always the best place to be able to talk about things. It's all a bit formal. You actually want to be able to feel quite comfortable and to sit down and relax, and then you're actually able to put You can put your best points of view across and really articulate and explain exactly what you feel and such. And I think we'd appreciate that, because we can see that you have got a lot to be able to offer us in order for us to be able to work better and work smarter and deliver better things for yourselves.
Am I allowed to ask a question on transport, with send, to do a send? So bus passes, it takes a while to get them. You have to give them the actual form, say you have it. Can that maybe be shortened so you don't have to show it?
So your bus pass is this in order to be able to go to school? Is this?
Yes.
Yes. So can you just give me a bit more information? How long have you had to sort of actually wait in order to get your bus pass?
It took a few weeks. You can't use it until 9:30, which I don't get.
Right. Oh, that's a bit different. That's a policy that exists about bus passes, in that people who have bus passes, it's like older people as well who have bus passes. You can't use them until after 9:30. So that is actually a policy, and that's another part of the council that actually deals with those things about bus passes. But in terms of how quickly you could get your bus pass, we might be able to ask and see if there could be something done so that could be done a little bit quicker. I don't know. But one of the problems is that the council has a limited amount of money and a limited amount of resources, so it's actually quite difficult, and a limited number of people to be able to process and do those. But that might be a question that we could put to Councillor Coker, who is responsible for transport.
Thank you for listening to us.
Could I just open up for Jemima?
I only want to say something very quickly. I mean, have you thought about becoming councillors, any of you? Because I can't actually believe how at home you are in this committee situation. And I know it's kind of rude to invite yourself to things, I mean, but I was wondering, as an action following on and actually just thinking about this as the beginning, I know I shouldn't really be doing recommendations, but I'm not on the committee as such, but just as this is the start of something, it feels to me. And I wonder if we could be invited to come maybe to one of your meetings, or the committee. It really does feel like the start of something. And honestly, hand on heart, I'm absolutely blown away by all of you. Your confidence, your brilliant questions. We talk all the time about hearing the voice of the child. You've blown me away. Sorry, I'm speechless, which is kind of unusual for me.
Can I just say one more thing? Is I think what's really important about this is that you have come, and you've come with really constructive, really useful ideas, questions that have really made me think, made us think. And to be quite honest, I think the partnership of working together would be, especially when we're talking about the graduated approach and such, I think, and resources, would be really, really beneficial and would help us so much. So thank you very much, and certainly thank you for coming today.
Thank you. Just 1 second, Councillor Tippett, if that's okay. So I am currently the chair of this scrutiny. That might change next year. However, my vice chair, Councillor Carlisle, would like to assure you that we've heard your questions today and that they are on record, and the job of this scrutiny is to make sure that your voices will echo when you leave this room. And I'd like to say thank you for coming. I am terrified in this seat every time I sit here, and you've just blown me away, so thank you. Would you mind if I let some councillors ask you a few questions? Is that all right? Councillor Tippett.
I'm afraid mine wasn't a question, because you've all explained yourself so well today that I can't think of anything else to ask at this point. I was just moving the formal point of, do you need a councillor on the committee to move Councillor Lang's recommendation to make sure it's all done properly and not missed out? Because I'm happy to do that.
I mean, we can totally do that. Yeah? Could you action that, please?
Yes, Councillor Tibbets, you've got a second there.
Who's seconder for Councillor McLean? Thank you. And a quick vote, please. Thank you. Is there Councillor Stevens?
Yeah, can I ask one or two of you to say, when you go home tonight, wherever you go to, and somebody says, what type of day have you had? How was it at your meeting? What would you say?
It was really good.
Because?
Getting out of my comfort zone. I've never done meetings before like this, so it's really good. Let George speak now.
I would just like to first say thank you for letting us come, because it's very important that we talk to you as young people. And I think just to say I've actually done something that a lot of people think wouldn't be possible. You know, going to a council meeting, actually speaking to people who represent us. So again, from me and everyone, thank you for what you do for our city.
I felt very excited because I met some really important people.
It's worth it to go in the books of the best days ever. Thank you.
Councillor Harrison, did you have a question?
For getting my mic. It was just coming back on that question regarding the bus passes. So you said about the fact that it takes a long time and it can be a few weeks. And I'm just wondering whether or not there is a possibility. I know you said about talking to Councillor Coker, you know, about some form of temporary bus pass. If it takes a while to get the official thing, but something that's going to mean that you're going to be able to get into school and you're going to be able to be part of that community and that family quicker, not coming in a few weeks later when it's harder. You know, is there some way to do that? That's one part of my question. The other part is, I don't think I'd ever considered before that actually there might be the possibility that some young people can't get into school until after 9:30 because those that are helping them to get into school may require waiting until 9:30 for their bus pass to be, you know, for them to be allowed onto a bus. And I think it's a really important point because it may be something that we can consider that actually is this what is a block to some young people getting into school because those that help them most to get into school can't help them to get there.
Thank you, Natalie. Could I just ask David to come in on that?
So the first thing about the time it takes to get a bus pass, we can absolutely look at that. And Councillor Coker has been suggested because on behalf of all the councillors, he knows all the bus companies and would be a really good person for that. So we'll certainly do that. And we will check out the second part. I'm not aware that there are any children that can't attend school because we give them a bus pass to attend and therefore they can't use it until 9:30. But we will definitely get that checked out, Alfie, as you've raised that to make sure there aren't.
I can get to school. I use it in the afternoons instead. I use my card to get to school in the mornings instead, just so I get there on time.
I use a bus pass as well, so I know what it's like for Alfie in the mornings for college.
I think so. What you're saying is that you can't get to school or college then by using your bus. You go by car.
I get my bus. It's annoying. It's got to be the 9:30.
Okay, well, this is new. So this is something new for all of us. We didn't know or appreciate that. No, of course. Okay, we will definitely take that back and look into that quickly.
So, Jake, could you please put in an action that we're going to check this out? Thank you. Councillor Lang.
It's only a very quick thing. Jake has very kindly said if you want to, you can take your name. Do you want to take your nameplates home with you?
So on behalf of Plymouth City Council, I'd like to say thank you for coming. Thank you for being brave. Thank you for telling us what we need to hear and asking the questions that we needed to answer. And we'd love to come and see you, as Councillor Lang has said, and we'll look into how we can make that happen. Thank you for coming. Councillor Stevens, sorry, we just have a little longer to, is that, is, sorry, it wasn't me.
I think he should get a detention.
We're still on. We're still online. So we are 5 minutes past. There is a second part to this. How are we?
If there's any questions, we can take it outside. That's easy. Or would you like to ask questions?
Yeah. Would you like to ask questions now, or we can? Are you okay? Maybe email them in.
Sally's had enough questions. Sorry, through you, Chair. So that was part one. That was about the accessible plan and their thoughts and on the improvement plan. There was another report that Mike Page did. It's just whether you have any questions on that, members.
It was in the supplement.
No, it wasn't. No, it
No.
wasn't.
Page 113, Councillor Harrison. Councillor Tippett.
Just in case I missed it, just making sure that the bus thing is formally noted as is that does it need to be a recommendation? Again, happy to.
We took it as a recommendation and we voted on it. Yeah.
Awesome.
Could I
Councillor
just
Cresswell?
clarify about the bus thing? The bus thing is in fact something that's been in place a long time. They are it's having a bus pass for not specifically for school or whatever, but you can have, young people can have, as older people have as well, a bus pass. And those bus passes are used in what's not the main commuting times, well, particularly in the morning. So it runs from 9:30. And that is, I think, the bus pass that that Alfie was in fact referring to. So it's not actually about him getting to school. It's actually about the additional bus passes that. And it works in the same way as the bus passes do for people who have reached retirement age as well. And so I think that's what's actually being referred to. But we should be able to do, we might be able to do something about the speed at which bus passes that Alfie is referring to are actually come out. One of the difficulties would be if you were to make those bus passes universal and they applied well before the 9:30 point in the morning, would be a massive cost, in fact, to the council, and Councillor Coker would have a huge hole, in fact, in his budget. Just the clarification there.
Thank you, Councillor Cresswell. Are there any other questions? No? Are you happy to move on to the work programme? Of course, Councillor Beer is very happy to do that. So, I need to change my glasses, I'm sorry. Item number 12 for members to discuss the work programme and to consider items for the next municipal year. Before I open it up, I would like to propose a select committee which would look at emotional health and well-being of children, which would examine issues of inclusion and persistent absence, child death and suicide, SEND and EHCPs, which would take place in the new municipal year and subject to other committee involvement. And the reason I have asked for this is because I raised a question here that didn't sit within our terms of reference. So that is my proposal. Would everybody be happy? Do I need to second it or? So, and a vote, please. Thank you very much.
And then it's just a case of, is there anything else?
Anything else?
Clearly, I've already raised the issue of toileting within our school environment. And I really think we ought to have a conversation in and around that and how the policy affects all the schools across the piece, because it has a knock-on effect to young people's mental health. It also has a health issue. So whether this will become into the health and wellbeing board, I'm not entirely sure, but I really do think we need to discuss it, because I am not having this brushed under the carpet. Too many young people have been affected by not being able to go to the toilet in their school time, and it's causing a lot of issues. And I mean, I could be very graphic about some of the examples I've been given, and it would mortify you, quite frankly. So I'd like to see that on a work programme, either it's on the Children's Scrutiny panel or into the Health and Wellbeing panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Beer. That's been noted. Any other ideas?
There's just one thing. I'm just wondering if we note it down. I saw Jenny Way outside, Chair, and she was saying that usually the Youth Parliament used to get our report the week before so that they could take it to the Youth Parliament, discuss it before it came to scrutiny. And she was wondering if that could be an action point again going forward, if they could have that.
Could I comment on that? So could I propose that we work up for the new municipal year a process by which for every meeting we engage children and young people? So that might be on a general, that would be more general. And I have, in a model that I have worked before, where we have one of our participation team that would go and work with the young people. They'd choose a report, we'd write the report in young people friendly language, etc. They'd come back with questions either in person or present them to us generally. And I'm just going to the UK Parliament now, so they're waiting for me. So I'll head up there, if you don't mind, just as soon as I finish speaking. So we could do something universally with them, but then on a subject matter basis, like we've done today, invite young people into the meeting, because it's so powerful, isn't it? And it gives them a real good opportunity. Yeah. So we'll move that forward.
Lovely. Thank you. Thank you, David. I will see you in a moment for the treats. Councillor Beer.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, which a lot of the panel wouldn't be aware of, but back in the day, we used to have young people on our scrutiny panel, and our young person was Kate Taylor. And she was quite fiery in our meetings, but she was very precise in the questions that she would ask. And we benefited a lot from having Kate on our meetings. It was just really good. So I'm glad you're now looking down that avenue.
Thank you, Councillor Beer. Anything else?
I'm just going to go back to what initially at the beginning. I know Councillor McClay was saying that the Conservative group hadn't filled all the groups here. I don't know if you want this minuted or how you want to deal with McClay. And the reason why I've left it is because I want to just get clarity from the Chief Whip. It's because of proportionality. So we've taken up all the spaces we can. I know it seems to be looking as it's a Conservative vacancy, but it's actually not. It's proportionality of the group size. We don't have enough spaces because Councillor Stoneman actually asked to be on this group on this scrutiny, and he couldn't be. So that's what I was told.
Could I wrap that up? Yeah. Because I don't think this is the forum for that. No. Because this isn't a political space. No. This is a space for young people, and I I don't want that discussed here. There is democratic support that will help you with that, should that be taken forward. If that's okay, thank you. Thank you very much for this year. It's been amazing, and hopefully I'll see some of you at the debrief. Yes? Fantastic, thank you. Thank you. That's okay. Thank you very much. Thank you.